Happy Saturday, everybody, and good morning. Saturday morning. Oh.
I don't really like parking. I'm going to need a priority parking space. I only work remotely. How are your safe spaces? Give us 1 second. Will your company protect me against microaggressions? You're triggering me. Is this interview almost over?
You don't run a daycare. You run a business. So why use high-priced recruitment agencies who charge you up to 40% of an employee's first-year salary? So they're focused on getting you the costly talent, not the best fit, which means you get more of this.
What's your policy on paying employees to attend protests? I demand 8 weeks.
Kelly's working on it.
At least 12 weeks of paid vacation.
Good.
I'm going to need a lot of food. Sure.
Do you have a game room? My pronouns are season zero.
And you hired grown-ups? Call redballoon.work and skip those high-priced recruitment agencies. Call
You could get a high-efficiency gas insert from Coach.
Are your windows ready? Drafty. They know what it takes to keep.
First time we get to say it. Our phone number is 303-696-1971. A little bit of a hyper glitch. All's well in the world. Saturday weather, 710 KNUS, says evening snow. It is so foggy outside this morning. 14 tonight. And then tomorrow, Sunday, 30 degrees, and Monday, 38 degrees. Let me reset this. I've been wanting to do this show for quite a while. And if the anniversary is the right word, of John Kennedy's assassination, we were really knee-deep in politics. But there's so many different things that go into this. And one is, as an amateur reader of history, there's major theories of history, from the Greeks to the Marxists to the people who look at technology now differently, and why things move ahead. And last night I did some reading, and yesterday afternoon, about what are the theories of history? Why do we get to do this? And now, because we're totally locked into conspiracy. And even the last election prior to this one, Trump-Biden, even going back to Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And so again and again and again, conspiracy raises its head. And we have an excellent guest coming up in the next hour. Her name's Katrina, and she's been with us before, Katanna Zachry. And she's done this book on the Lone Star in Texas. But there is what's called the Great God Theory. And of course, if you go back to the Greeks and the Romans, it was the gods. The gods caused things to happen. And of course, we get into early Israelites and get into pre-Christianity, and even in Islam and modern Christianity, we have the Great God Theory. Many, many times I'm listening to talk radio, and the on-air guy will say God got Donald Trump elected or reelected. And so that's the Great God Theory. Then you have the Great Man Theory, which is this very straightforward view of history. It's too close to, sometimes to conflict. But the Great Man Theory comes from a disassociation from the Great God Theory. But how many times now have you heard some on air talk about Donald Trump and divine intervention and Donald Trump's election? Carlyle, one of the early historians who wrote Universal History, the history of what man has accomplished in the world, at the bottom of the history of the great man, and this was the Great Man Theory. So then that was also then the Great Mind Theory. There's another theory of history, the more sophisticated, and it's a variant of the Great God Man line, but it's the Great Mind Theory. And that's when you find out you have the Aristotelians, people looking forward and looking backward. The Best People Theory, that the interpretation, the elite, the best race, the favored nation. How many times have you heard, God blesses the United States of America, the favored nation, the ruling class? God loves the King of England or the King of France more than he loves you. Old Testament assumed the Israelites were God's chosen people. We hear that all the time. These are God's people. These were the Israelites. The human nature theory. Most persistent view is that history is the last analysis been determined by human nature, good or bad. And all these different great theories. And as a guy that has nothing to do in the afternoon but to read Socrates and Plato and Nietzsche and Aristotle and other great idealists, the human nature theory really plays out. But recently has come in conspiracy. 303-696-1971. And I've been wanting to talk about this, and this is a chance to do so this morning. The weather's right. The pot's right. Even this morning, this U.S. Army Special Forces Master Sergeant begins the whole conspiracy theory. I was listening to driving in, or actually early in the morning, listening to some news radio, the string of coincidences that apparently link the New Year's Day tragedies in New Orleans and Las Vegas have now become conspiracy theory, mounting evidence about the Cybertruck bombing, and now the decorated U.S. Special Forces Master Sergeant. And in a text that's been made public, he's writing, "I need to cleanse my mind of brothers I've lost and relieve myself of the burden of the lives I've taken." So it really gets back to John F. Kennedy. And most of these explanations, and I read the books, and I suspect many of you do as well, but that is the jumping off point. A majority of people in this country believe the Kennedy assassination involved a conspiracy, including RFK Jr., who is about to become a very prominent part of the Trump administration. Did you see the interview? And I watched it, I don't know, half a dozen times, when the news person says to RFK Jr., "Did the CIA kill your uncle?" He said, "Yes." I mean, like asking somebody what the time is or what's the weather like. So 303-696-1971. And again, we have all of these different theories of history for many centuries. And the Greeks are really pretty much the first historians, and you have Plato and you have Aristotle, and they're looking. Remember, you have a slave-holding aristocracy in these countries, and these people were writing that they X'd them out. They didn't exist. The qualities of human nature, and finally we get to the Jeffersonians. But then we have the Marxists, and then we have the people who look at technology. Somebody mentioned, John Caldera mentioned the drones, and are now part of conspiracy. The drones are really part of conspiracy. The church they have an intellectual spokesperson to try and explain revolutionary views that have happened to the church. And the next big advance in scientific understanding of history comes in the rise of a bourgeoisie society and the discovery of other regions of the globe. In other words, Columbus sees the New World associated with commercial and naval expansion, changes history again. And now here we are. We really are in a conspiracy. There are people that I listen to now on radio shows, or I read their work, and they see the world exactly as the world was seen by the radical left in 1968. Who's in charge? So there's no wrong opinion. I mean, that's the interesting thing about this. But a majority of people in our country today think the Kennedy assassination involved a conspiracy. And do you think that one man was responsible for that assassination? I've actually begun a new book about it. So do you think that others were involved in the conspiracy? And then it brings up everything that comes with that. So as lines are lighting up, you want to jump to the phones? Want to see what we can get out of this? Okay, here we go. Let's try David in San Francisco. Hey, David, it's Saturday and foggy here. It must look like San Francisco. Good morning.
Hey, morning, Peter, and Happy New Year.
You too, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and it sounds like are you trying to get man and God and law all in on the same show?
No, I'm trying to do a show that just kind of will take on its own. It'll take on its own self here in about 15 or 20 minutes.
Sure. Well, it's a good start. It's funny you were talking about the Kennedy assassination. When I moved out here to San Francisco, I got on with a TV show. I was crew on a TV show that was about the Kennedy assassination. And every week we would have a different specialist. And man, I'll tell you, I've heard them all. But the way I figured actually is that organized crime was so powerful that it was running the government. And Kennedy was trying to put a stop to it.
No, I don't think he was trying to put a stop to it. But I do think that they were.
Well, Bobby was.
And Bobby is the reason why I think Bobby is one of the reasons why his brother was killed.
Well, and that's just backs it up that organized crime had him killed, and the politicians were just dancing to organized crime. So, like when we think that it was the CIA and they're supposed to follow the politicians, well, the politicians were in with organized crime.
But wasn't it? Well, I mean, first of all, I love the call. Wasn't it true that the CIA was in bed with organized crime, in bed with attempts to overthrow Fidel Castro, in bed with trying to retrieve for the mob and for the country, Cuba?
Yeah, sugar and gambling. Yeah,
sure. So, where's the rub?
Well, and that's the whole point. And it's like, we the people own this country, right? The rivers and the skies and the lakes and all of the parks and the libraries and all it. We the people own it. Yeah. And if organized crime comes along and says, no, you don't, what are we going to do?
But here, this is the theory, the sort of feudal hierarchy, if you would. Now there's a term that is on talk radio like a weather report. It's called the Deep State. Now, not very often, if ever, do I hear a deep stater start to talk about exactly what you talked about, organized crime, and or the relationship with the CIA, which is part of the theory. It is a theory of who runs this country, and you made that you said that or made that point.
Well, and it gets into what is politics if organized crime is really running it. So, like one of you remember Meyer Lansky was
Sure.
this big, he was the money man for all of the mob families. And if they wanted to do some money laundering, they had gambling, they might have had drugs, they might have had prostitution, all the different, big income streams. And they wanted to clean up that money so they could pretend to be, billionaires. And so Meyer Lansky was that guy. And he took their money and put it into Wall Street. And that was 30 years ago. And so Wall Street basically is owned by organized crime. And they dance to the tune of organized crime. And the politicians don't know what to do, so they just take orders.
Do you believe that organized crime put Jack Kennedy in the White House?
Well, his dad was.
I mean, these are. I don't mean to be abrupt, but these are sort of yeses and nos. Do you think organized crime put Jack Kennedy in the White House?
Well, his dad put him into the White House, and his dad was under organized. Well,
okay, so
his dad was a bootlegger, right? And so in Prohibition, when liquor was illegal, his dad was a rum smuggler or brandy or
sure.
What was it?
Haig, and his dad was involved with, his dad was really involved with Frank Costello. But my question is, I'm asking yeses and nos, and I don't mean to be abrupt, but do you believe that his dad, and you obviously do, you said so. So if organized crime was capable of putting him in, which I think they did, then comes the double cross that the administration would not do what organized crime wanted them to do. And as you well know, if they pay the band, they get to call the tune. But again, this gets into the greater question here is conspiracy theory, and of the major theories of history. And now what I've seen happen in our country, and talk radio plays out in it a lot, it is exactly that, is conspiracy. And the conspiracy of the shot, of the COVID shot, one way or the other, that plays out now in conspiracy. Does that follow down to you?
Oh, I've gotten all the updates. I think I'm on my fifth or sixth one, so I don't fall for that anti-vax crap.
No, that's not the point. What does RFK Jr. say?
Well, I think he's blackmailable. And that's just what Donald Trump is appointing everybody who can be blackmailed. And he wants to control his whole cabinet, so every one of them he's got the stink on. And if you set up our property to be managed like that, you're not a patriot. Because, this guy is trying to milk America for all it's got, and he's going to sabotage every agency that we own. The Parks Department.
So let me again. Now you have a conspiracy notion. Donald Trump is. Tell me that again. Donald Trump is doing what?
Well, he's dancing to the tune of what organized crime wants, and they don't want to clean up their pollution. If organized crime owns Wall Street, and Wall Street is polluting us, and then Wall Street comes up with phony insurance companies that don't pay out, and then Wall Street is coming up with mortgages that are so insanely high that nobody can survive, then it's a structure that they're trying to kill us. The food is junk food that is going to kill you, eating all that junk food crap. And they make the junk food so cheap that people eat it just to fill their bellies. And they're basically poisoning themselves and paying high dollar to do it.
So give me this one more time. Final question. What is the purpose of Donald Trump's cabinet?
To sabotage America.
I
mean, you look at structurally, the monarchies have hated the social contract. The social contract said that you actually did provide sidewalks for the public. The citizens deserved a sidewalk. They deserved a gutter. They deserved a library. They deserved a school system. They deserved a sewer department. They deserved fresh water coming out of their tap. We, the people, buy that on April 15th, and we like it. I like having clean water coming out of the tap, and I like the idea that the sewage doesn't overflow in the street. And Donald Trump and his lying phonies are telling us that all government is bad. Now, it's like, why would I throw away my sewer department for a guy that's going to get the check writing ability of the sewer department?
Now the conspiracy now expands to yet another level of class struggle. Have a good day. It's what you just. It's what you just did. You just did that.
Magna Carta is all the way 11th century, right, where the people deserved sewer systems.
Well,
the people deserved clean water, not that the king was going to poison the river and then laugh at everybody.
King didn't give a damn about what should happen.
And so that's what Trump is walking us into.
Right.
Boss man tells us what to do.
We're there.
And I'm not going for it.
Okay, obviously not. All right, I'm happy today to talk to you about our friends at Water Pros, and Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. Here, the guy set it up. You can remove, they're called forever chemicals, microplastics, hard water with Water Pros Peter Boyles special. Make this phone call. Let them come out and test your water. Phone number is 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554, 303-862-5554, and they come and they test your water at your house. These guys are the best. Start the process. Go to waterpros.net and sign up for your free in-home consultation. We've done it. We had problems. They straightened the problems out. We have equipment now, machinery, right? Equipment at the house that takes all that out of the water. These guys are the best. Trust them. Water Pros, family-owned, veteran-owned business, dedicated to providing you with the best in water treatment for less than the other guys. Our friends, let them just come and do the test. 303-862-5554. I'm Peter Boyles. It's foggy in the city, and it's 710 KNUS. Good morning, everyone. On a Saturday, the 4th of January, 2025, 39 will be the high today. We have evening snow, 14 tonight, 30 on Sunday. It is going to be one of those mornings. I can almost sense it. 303-696-1972. Listen to me, 1971. Talking, well, in open lines. Let it go at that. This is Paul. And Paul, you're on the radio show. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter. Where's Mary?
Peter, Paul, and Mary. Yes.
Yes.
Took me a second.
I joined the Navy. I joined the Navy in 1960. I was in until 1964. I was part of the invasion of Cuba in 1961-62. And then I was a guard for President Kennedy in 1962. Then I had orders to Vietnam, 1963. And so I lived an amazing period. I'm writing a book about it right now.
You certainly did.
Amazon. And so, yeah, I survived an amazing period. And so my impression of what happened in the Kennedy assassination is slightly different than many people's. I read this book called Coup d'etat in America, and I'm an investigator. One of the things investigators learn about is you know what the most unique part of the human body is that you can identify a person from positively just by looking at them?
I do not.
It's the ear.
Huh.
And that's what investigators use. That's why banks have those cameras aimed at your ear. And so what happened in Dallas was immediately after the assassination, this one lone witness solved the whole case immediately. He saw the three snipers run from the fence and jump in a train boxcar and hide. And he called the police and said, "Hey, you're looking in the wrong place. They're hiding right next to my control tower. They're in this yellow boxcar right here." The police rushed the boxcar and arrested them and had their pictures taken, beautiful pictures of all of their ears. So then they were released. And then they were arrested again in 1972 in the Watergate burglary.
I was going to bring up, was that the connection? They were called the tramps or the hobos, and then they turn out to be the Watergate burglars.
And they turned out to be the top hitman for Nixon and the CIA, and they all worked for the State Department. Now, if you want to talk about,
they worked for the CIA, they worked for the FBI.
No, don't try and make it complex because it's real simple. If you remember Operation Paperclip, you ever heard of Operation Paperclip?
Bringing in the Nazis. Sure.
Yeah, Alan Dulles worked in World War II in Switzerland, negotiated directly with Hitler. Hitler gave him a list of 2,000 of his top officers he wanted saved when it was obvious he was losing. Alan Dulles then shuttled them into Langley, Virginia, and gave each one of them a house and hired them in the State Department. That was 2,000 German Nazis were put into the State Department.
With disagreement, I'm not an Alan Dulles fan, but when they
well, let me finish.
All right.
Let me finish the history because I lived it. One of my relatives was involved in an organization in 1942 of my father with the OSS, which was the original security set up by the military. And the OSS fought bravely against the Nazis. And what the OSS recruited in the United States was anybody that would be willing to parachute into Germany at night behind enemy lines and fight in Germany against the Nazis while the whole Nazi army was off in Russia fighting against the Russians. And so who they recruited, the OSS recruited, the majority of these people were young, educated, union members, Jewish men. That's mainly who joined the OSS. The OSS was, so Alan Dulles, when he got back from Germany with his 2,000 Nazi officers, he immediately fired the whole SS, got rid of them, and the next month he had created the Central Intelligence Agency out of the 2,000 German Nazi officers he brought back from Germany. That's the history I lived through.
Well,
and
with
because I had
respect,
relatives who were in the OSS.
yeah, with respect, there's you said an awful lot of different things at once. The creation of Harry Truman creates the CIA out of the OSS, out of Bill Donovan.
No.
Oh, okay.
I have relatives that were in the OSS. My father fought in this period in the
So
same.
listen, without trying to, you're trying to tell me that Bill Donovan and Harry Truman did not create the CIA.
Oh, no, I know they didn't, because I worked my life. I was in Navy intelligence.
All right.
The way I got into Navy intelligence was in 1960, the Navy was recruiting people this way. They would lay down pictures in front of you and say, okay, what can you see in this picture? They were looking for people who had eyes, were born with eyes that could see through camouflage. They gave me 6 pictures. I spotted the object through the camouflage on all 6. I immediately got orders to Navy Photo Intelligence School. That's what my Navy career was. I've been in intelligence all my life. For the last 40 years, I've worked as an investigator. I know CIA people. I had relatives that were OSS. I can tell you the history of the whole intelligence because I lived through it since I was born, 1941. And my family was involved in this stuff. Because my whole life I've lived through it. The OSS was a real American organization. It just happened to be mainly Jewish men. And my mother was very good friends with the Jewish people that we lived with in Chicago. And her husband was in the OSS. And that's why I knew this history. And I still know their son.
So all of these young men that Bill Donovan recruited in Harvard and Yale and the Ivy League schools, and these were the beginnings. And in the meantime, you said about the Watergate guys that none of them were feds, but yet I know Gordon Liddy was an FBI agent. We know that that these guys came from different branches of secret parts of the government, and you're telling me none of that's true.
Well, I know the people we're talking about, and I've met many of them because I'm old. I'm probably one of the few living people still from the Bay of Pigs invasion. I'm still alive. All of them that I know of are dead.
Did you go ashore?
No, because we had
That's right. What
the whole
ship?
East Coast of the United States was ready to go.
What ship?
I was assigned to go to the Essex, and we had Guantanamo Bay. NAS Guantanamo is a Navy base, still is.
Yeah.
And we were ready to go, even if the president wasn't going. We in the military were going.
What ship were you on?
I was in Navy intelligence. I was on a base in Patuxent River, Maryland, NAS Patuxent River, Maryland. That's where we were planning the invasion of Cuba from. But it was the whole East Coast was mobilized. And so we were ready to go now. And then Kennedy, for some reason, well, he didn't think it was a good idea. And he didn't want to do it.
No.
And he said that in the beginning. He told because originally Ike and Vice President Nixon and Eisenhower originally planned the invasion of Cuba. People forget Nixon was vice president.
Nixon was his plan.
Yeah. So they wanted the casinos back. They wanted the gambling, the drugs, the prostitution back.
Right.
And so that's why we were going into Cuba. And a lot of us in the Navy did not want to go because we were in the Navy to get a GI Bill to go to college. That's why I was there, because I didn't have money as a child. So I knew I could get into college through the Navy. That's why I joined. So then the OSS was disbanded when Allen Dulles brought back these 2,000 Nazi officers and created the CIA. And then, and as a matter of fact, in 2016, the U.S. government finally issued an honorum for the OSS. It's taken that long to
the paper clip
recognize the OSS.
Then we got to end the call. But paperclip, in fact, there's a incredible book that I read about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, about the paperclip, and they got away with it because they were SS officers. Von Braun was an SS officer. His staff were SS officers, and so when they leave and he tells them to put their uniforms on, their Class A uniforms, and to get past the German guards. And they're in cars, and he tells them to bring civilian clothes. And they stop along the road, and he says, change into your civilian clothes. And they change into civilian clothes, and they're driving into the arms, if you would, of the Allies, of the British and the Americans. And one of von Braun's staffers said,
See, you're talking about a book you read. I lived through this stuff.
you weren't on the
And
highway with von Braun. Don't do that for me. Just
let me tell you what.
let me
Alan Dulles was stationed in Switzerland and actually met with Hitler in Switzerland. Hitler gave him the list of 2,000 people he wanted to save.
He met with an
Alan Dulles
He met with an
had
SS.
them come to Switzerland.
Okay.
They got on the U.S. Air Force plane and flew to Langley,
Okay,
Virginia. I know this stuff.
Okay, Alan Dulles met with an SS general whose last name was Wolf, and that was the surrender. But you saying to me on a Saturday morning, Adolf Hitler and Alan Dulles met in Switzerland?
Twice. And
What years?
1944, 1945. And as a matter of fact, this was when Dulles was very powerful. And he had an office there in Bern, Switzerland, that had two front doors, well, a front door and a back door. And he kept the light on which door he wanted people to come into. Hitler and his staff came into and met with.
Did they come by car or did they fly in?
No, they came by car into Switzerland. Switzerland was a neutral country, and both sides had spies there.
Listen, I've read a lot of. I'm not the smartest guy by any stretch of the imagination. I never ever heard Alan Dulles met Adolf Hitler 2 times in Switzerland.
Oh yeah, and it's The Devil's Chessboard is one book. Another one is by that one is the one I've read most recently. But there are 4 good books on the OSS, and they all mention that when they give the dates and what the subject matter was, the first time they met, it was an arms control meeting. And
I will do my very best. That'll be my project. You take care of yourself. We are underway on a Saturday, 303-696-1971. As we said, when the guy said, "Where's the show going this morning?" I said, "I'll let you know in 20 minutes." 710 KNUS, my good friend Danny Kaplis in the Kaplis Law Firm. And we went through some stuff, our family did, and Danny was the attorney, and you couldn't ask for more. He suggests that you choose a lawyer who shares your values because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says so much about you to everybody involved in the case. Dan Kaplis' dad, of course, was a cop. We talked about his mom. He's been dedicated his last 40 years of his life to helping people who are hurt, serious motor vehicle crashes. Danny's believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Now, I did his radio show a week and a half ago, and he's believed to have been and is the guy who has won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. The Kaplis Law Firm, now the official partners with the Nuggets and the Avalanche. Dan Kaplis Law, a serious firm for serious cases. Dan accepts righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis. And again, can represent good people from all walks of life without regard and ability to pay. And so you need Danny's help. 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, or hit dankaplislaw.com. It's CAPLIS.com. Give me 2 seconds here before we pause. John Foster Dulles' brother's name was Alan. And there's incredible books that are called, that have talked about at great length the creation of the CIA. There's a book called Legacy of Ashes that I recommend. There was an SS general by the name of Wolfe. And Wolfe wanted to surrender, and the great fear was that the Communist Party was going to take over a lot of northern Italy, because that's the industrial part of Italy. And Alan Dulles and General Wolfe had a secret surrender, and it was not part of the agreement. The agreement was made that no Nazi or none of the Axis would ever surrender without surrendering to the Soviets, the French, the British, and the Americans all together. And so Alan Dulles allowed Wolfe to surrender, and then they let the SS stay in place armed and act as cops because they feared the rise of the Communist Party in northern Italy. And at that point, it was probably the break between Stalin, FDR, and Winston Churchill, because they accepted the surrender secretly without bringing the Soviets in to the surrender. And there are many historians who believe that that may have been the jumping off place for the Cold War. Let me see. Some of these things just don't even want to read. They're just punks. I just, for God's sake, know something about, well, I knew the show would get good. It's Saturday morning, the 4th of January, 2025. First time we get to say 25, right? 39 will be the high, 14 tonight, 30 to 30 on Sunday. This is 710 KNUS.
At this hour, I'm Christina Awayo in Dallas, and here are your top stories. The man who police say drove his truck through a crowd of people in New Orleans, Shamsuddin Jabbar, planned to kill his family, but was worried that media attention wouldn't be focused on the war between believers and disbelievers, according to officials. They've also found bomb-making materials at a New Orleans Airbnb and are looking for a possible connection. The FBI says Jabbar posted 5 videos on his Facebook account proclaiming his support for ISIS. They say he joined the terror group before the summer and left behind a will and testimony. Jabbar served in the Army for 10 years and was deployed to Afghanistan in 2009. And after first saying Jabbar was working with multiple other people, authorities are now saying that he acted alone. In a fiery social media post, President Donald Trump took aim at the country's, quote, weak leadership for failing to protect Americans just hours after authorities revealed they were investigating the attack in New Orleans and Las Vegas as terror-related. Trump saying our country is a disaster, a laughingstock all over the world. The DOJ, FBI, and the Democrat state and local prosecutors have not done their job. Officials are acknowledging that there are, quote, very strange similarities between the 2 terror suspects who carried out attacks in New Orleans and Las Vegas. That's what you need to know at this hour. In Dallas, Christina Awayo, Salem News Channel.
You better believe it. Good morning, everyone. 710 KNUS on Saturday, the January 4th, 2025 edition. It's going to be 39 for a high, but I don't know if it gets there. Foggy outside, 14 tonight, 30 on Sunday, Monday, 38 degrees. Go to the phones. We go to Mary. She's in Denver. Mary, you're on a radio show. Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you. A very interesting program. And I have 2 points based on what your previous guest caller was discussing. One about the Kennedy assassination. My family home has been in Dallas. Our next door neighbor worked in the purse and belt factory that Mr. Zapruder, who took that famous film, owned. She, on the day of the presidential motorcade in downtown Dallas, she and some of the other staff went down to stand on the street and watch the motorcade come by to see the president and the first lady. Well, she always declared that the shots came from the grassy knoll. No one ever interviewed her, but when everything was over, if you will, she went back in the building, rode up the elevator with Mr. Zapruder, and she said to us, "I never saw another human being with a face redder than Mr. Zapruder's." She didn't realize that he had taken the film. So I'll always think that Lee Harvey Oswald is not the only person involved in that assassination. The other point that the guest was making had to do with the CIA and his being in Vietnam. I am wondering if he happens to know how we might be in touch with the CIA chief who was in Saigon in 1975, Mr. Jacobson. Unfortunately, we don't have a first name, but he performed really a miraculous saving act. My friend was working with a Cambodian organization who had an orphanage in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and all the transportation in and out of Phnom Penh was stopped because the Khmer Rouge had encircled the city and were rocketing the airport. But she went to see Mr. Jacobson in the American Embassy at a suggestion of someone who worked at USAID, who used to help us with our program. Our program was taking care of orphan children and trying to get adoptive parents for them around the world. Anyway, Ruth went to the embassy, met with Mr. Jacobson, and he said yes, he would send a plane, an Air America plane, to evacuate those 60 plus orphans and the 2 Canadian caretakers from Phnom Penh to Saigon if the Vietnamese government would allow these Cambodians to come into Vietnam. Now, later, the person from our group who went with with Ruth to the American Embassy said, "Oh, she could take care of that," because we had worked for years closely with the Ministry of Social Welfare in Vietnam regarding the child welfare work that we were doing. And indeed, she got that permission from him that those Cambodian orphans could come in, could transit Vietnam. And so when they were seated there in the office with Mr. Jacobson, he said, "Well, I was sure that that would not be possible. So I thought, oh, I can make this promise of sending an airplane. But since you've got it, then I will follow through with my offer to send
I'm
an
going to tell
airplane.
you, we have 2 minutes, Mary. We have 2 minutes left. Go
And
ahead.
so he did. He sent the airplane, and those orphans and 2 caretakers were rescued. And we would very much like to be in touch with Mr. Jacobson or surviving family and friends for them to know what a wonderful deed the CIA Air America did. March 17, 1975.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The CIA ran an airline called Air America, and they did a lot of interesting things with that airline. And it wasn't just an airline. It wasn't an airline. It was everything, but it was called Air America, and they ran one in Central America like that. And then it is the CIA. But what an interesting hour of talk radio. I had no idea what was going to happen. And of course, as we say, talk radio, no man its master. Coming up, her name is Katanna Zachry, and we haven't spoken to her for a while. And her book, The Lone Star, and she makes sense. But I love this whole idea of understanding the theories of history, major theories of history. And one of them that has really merged now is assassination conspiracy theories or assassination theories. And daily now on radio shows you hear all of this, again, conspiracy theories, but it all goes back to Jack Kennedy, November 22nd, and all the conspiracy theories that have been spawned. These theories allege that the CIA, the mafia, Lyndon Johnson, Fidel Castro, KGB, some combination of these individuals and entities did this crime. And I'm certainly a believer. So we'll come back with Katanna. Hang on your hats. The latest poll that was conducted October 2nd through the 23rd says a majority of Americans do not believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Stay here. Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, the first one of 2025. Saturday, January 4, 2025. Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. We're Denver's talk station. And the weather, well, it's strange out there, but it's not as, across the country, the weather is really having a Saturday. It's going to be 39 for a high today. I don't know, we get there 14 tonight. Tomorrow on Sunday, 30 and 38 degrees. On Monday, this has been a perfect day to do this. It's been something that kicks around almost on every show, certainly conspiracy notions. And the Kennedy assassination inevitably comes up, especially after the two attempts on Donald Trump's life. And it gets into assassination conspiracy theories. And in the latest polling data, how few people do believe that the Warren report even holds an ounce of truth. In the meantime, I met this woman, I don't know how many years ago. Her book is Lone Star Speaks, and her name is Katanna Zachry, and along with her partner, Sarah Peterson. First of all, lady, thanks for doing the show. And it's a Saturday, and I don't know if Texas is catching any weather or not, but welcome back to Denver.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you asking me.
So let us do this. One of the triggers for some of this was the interview with RFK Jr. I don't know if you saw it, when he was asked if the CIA killed his uncle, and without blinking, he said yes. Have you seen that?
Yes.
What do you do with it?
Well, you're right. That interesting is not even a deep enough word about that. You would assume that he was speaking for his father, and I think he was. Also, that his father, of course, having been Attorney General, had access to information that the rest of us didn't. That also RFK knew of underhanded inside manipulations that were going on that the rest of the country and the world didn't know. So if RFK and then later his son says the CIA killed John F. Kennedy, I think it should be taken seriously. But then there are other people who will say RFK was also convinced that Lyndon Johnson was involved. That may be. I couldn't help but wonder, if that's the case, why he would have even considered accepting and wanting the vice presidency under someone like that.
Yeah.
If he really thought he had his brother killed. But then politics is politics, and he needed LBJ's assistance even getting elected to the New York Senate. But I've always assumed that surely Bobby Kennedy didn't think Lyndon was really involved in this, or I don't think he could have kept his animosity to himself.
No. I've read those many versions of the Great Texas Deer Hunt, when Bobby Kennedy goes to Texas to meet LBJ. They call him Uncle Cornpone behind his back. And,
True.
And they know they need him. They need him to bring in Texas, and he's going to quell the Southern, they were called Dixiecrats. He was going to quell them. But the story goes, and I've read it a couple of different ways, but Lyndon Johnson, there's a thing they call deer stands, where they actually wait on the stands for the deer. And whatever the rifle was, it kicked Bobby Kennedy in the face, and he bled, and Lyndon Johnson scoffed at him and said, "You got to be a man to do this." And is that the story that you've read as well?
Yes, and that's not atypical in Texas, because those rifles do have a huge kickback, and if you're not used to using them, they're going to knock you on your butt, I can tell you. Right. And also, to a man, I think women would have just laughed that off and not cared. But particularly to someone like Bobby, who was a little insecure about being shorter, about being the runt of the family, this would have been insulting tremendously.
And it did. And he did everything he could to ace Lyndon Johnson out of any and all things that were going to be important, that they would turn their backs on Lyndon Johnson. So Johnson had reason, but not to do that. Now, the involvement of the CIA and the involvement of the mafia, and that's where I think that the theory of these were the people that really needed Bobby Kennedy to go, but so they take his brother's life. Does that make sense?
Yes, to a certain extent it does. You can't, there are certain people you don't turn your back on. You don't make them feel like you have treated them unjustly, if you can laugh at that word, but when it comes to the mafia. But the CIA is similar.
Mm-hmm.
You don't use them for certain things and then try to control them. And I don't think what Kennedy realized that by then the CIA was beyond his control.
I agree.
I think like most presidents coming in, he assumed I'm going to have more power. And he made a comment to one of the authors that, I realized I got in here and I don't have the power that I thought I would have. And then that's just things he knew about.
Yeah.
We all know that the president has to have things going on, the government behind closed doors that even the president probably doesn't know about.
And he has the Dallases. He has John Foster and he has his brother Alan. And it's interesting when he gets rid of them, how Alan Dulles turns up on the Warren Commission.
Exactly. And let's face it, do you ever get rid of anyone who's been in the CIA? Not till they die.
No, particularly the Dulles brothers. And
yes, because I think they had such a following. They had been respected in a kind of an unusual definition of the word, but by the government and by previous presidents. And let's face it, they did know a great deal. They knew where the bodies were buried.
They buried them.
So it was kind of, yeah, exactly. It was kind of stupid in some ways to make an enemy out of them.
But this is all post the Bay of Pigs. And Jack Kennedy, do you believe that Jack Kennedy was going to break up? There's two great Jack Kennedy questions. One, was he going to break up the CIA? Number two, was he going to withdraw the American forces out of Southeast Asia? And his supporters say he was going to do both of those things. His deniers say he was going to do neither one.
I think the answer is somewhere in between. I'm not sure John Kennedy knew exactly what he was going to do. And being the politician he was, he made the statement, I've got to get reelected before I can do anything.
Yeah.
So he was playing the political game. Also, he was smart enough to realize he needed to have some more information about Vietnam, particularly, before he made that decision. As far as on Cuba, there were so many things that were going on behind closed doors that the administration did not want the public to know about, that they couldn't come out and say, look, we may have told the Cubans this, but this is what we're really doing. You don't reveal, as they say, national security information like that. But it also leaves you vulnerable to comments made from everyone because no one else knew everything that was going on. And I'm not sure Kennedy knew everything.
I was going to ask you that. Do you think that, because if you read the history of the so-called black gangs and Alpha 66 and Omega 7 and all these organizations, do you think Jack Kennedy knew that they were there and operating? Do you think he knew they were training in Guatemala? Because this was before he becomes president. You think all of this stuff is going on and he knows about it?
Well, I think if he didn't, it's because he was deliberately saying he didn't. Because Bradley Ayers wrote his book on the Zenith Secrets, where he talked about Bobby Kennedy coming down and watching them train. All right, there's very few things that Bobby and Jack Kennedy didn't know about. Now, I will say this. We talked to someone for our book who had known both Kennedys, who said one time she was sitting in the Oval Office with Bobby and Jack, and she observed something being said to the president and happened to look over, and Bobby just had a smirk on his face. And apparently she got the impression that Bobby knew about what this information was, but the president didn't. So Bobby was his brother's protector. He may have felt it was better that I don't tell him certain things.
I believe that if you can understand, and I don't pretend to, but if you can understand Cuba and Castro and Khrushchev and the Kennedys, and because it all ends, it's interesting to me that when John Kennedy's dead, all the issues surrounding Cuba, the attempts to topple the Castro brothers or whatever it is that they're going to do, all ends, and it switches to Southeast Asia. I mean, literally ends on the spot, and then it moves.
Exactly, and the irony is, think how many years we lived without a nuclear war from a country 90 miles away from us.
Oh yeah, sure.
And yet, 2 days before Kennedy was killed, we were all still worried that at any time we would have to go to a shelter and we might not even survive a nuclear war. We probably wouldn't have. So you're right. That's the irony that we went from, oh my gosh, this man is more than a thorn in our side. He's a deadly, evil person that's got to be done away with, to, well, let's just change our focus to Vietnam and let Castro do what he wants to.
And it happens that quick.
Yeah, literally.
65, the first Marines are put ashore, I think, in, it'll come to me, but they put them ashore. And these were some of the same men that were going to be used perhaps at the Bay of Pigs, but never were never launched. Because Jack Kennedy pulls them back. And I mean, it throws the whole thing into turmoil. And now the books are coming out now talking about how Khrushchev, they were afraid of letting the Cubans even near the missiles. They feared Che Guevara. They were the whole thing was just craziness. And in fact, Jack Kennedy didn't really win in Cuba because they withdrew missiles out of Turkey and I think out of Greece, and they took them home back to the United States. And so it ends Khrushchev's career, and it also ends Jack Kennedy's life. I think the whole thing to me is, if you could explain that, then maybe we can understand so much more.
Well, I guess if I could explain that, I would be heads and shoulders above the many people who've written books on it.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of them have really gotten really deeply into this, and people like Brad Ayers who were involved. I think you would look at it and say maybe we unintentionally made a mountain out of a molehill. Perhaps we were focused on the wrong thing. But I'm old enough to remember practicing hiding under your school desk, which looking back was stupid.
Absolutely.
Just stupid, And I remember my parents sending us to school on the day that we thought there might be the missile crisis. And later, my husband and I both looked back. He was in high school. And he said, why would they have sent us to school? Why wouldn't they have kept us home if they thought this was going to happen? And I said, I guess they were like most people. We stuck our head in the sand and said, this isn't going to happen. And lo and behold, it didn't. But
they sure did.
So right that we made such a momentous thing out of something that died away immediately after Kennedy's death.
That's the part that Katanna is with us. Katanna Zachry, The Lone Star Speaks, is the book, Peter Boyles, 710. KNUS on a very kind of nasty weather Saturday. I really do believe that. I mean, it was like this automatic. We don't talk about Cuba anymore. And now we're going to start. Now Lyndon Johnson starts talking about bringing the coon skin home and nailing it to the wall. He's talking about a whole other war, a whole other part of the world, and the Cuba gets put on the back burner. And I finally found out, just from my reading, that Brezhnev set Khrushchev up. Khrushchev and his wife had gone on a tour of some communal farms, and when they got back, there was Brezhnev and the KGB waiting for them. That's how they overthrew Khrushchev. I never read that before. That they literally were waiting for him with weapons when he got back.
So that had been planned, obviously, for quite some time.
Yeah.
It wasn't a spur of the moment decision. The only thing I can think of is I remember the Kennedys both saying privately to people that when they would have meetings, and including Lyndon, that he would just sit there and wouldn't really offer comment. Well, I think we can all understand that he wasn't sure whether they really wanted his actual feelings or whether he was supposed to amen whatever the president said. So he didn't say anything. I think his actions speak louder. Once he was in the position of continuing the harassment on Cuba, he didn't do so.
He didn't do it.
So he obviously didn't think the thorn in our side that the Kennedys did. But Lyndon Johnson wasn't the one who had been so embarrassed by the Bay of Pigs. The Kennedys were. And that was one thing Bobby Kennedy did not handle well, was embarrassment.
And they also weren't sharing, although Lyndon Johnson cheated on Lady Bird all the time. But then there's this whole connection into organized crime, Marilyn Monroe, Judy Campbell, who knows whom else was involved, the Peter Lawford connections, the stuff with Joe Kennedy. Lyndon Johnson had nothing to do with any of that.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if he knew about it because he had as many spies as Kennedy's did. But you're right. He wasn't tied into that. As far as anyone knows, he had his own little things going on.
Oh, he's got a son. Yeah. You ever see that kid? It's like, it's the old as I, it looks like Lyndon Johnson.
And believe me, having come from Texas, people supported him because what was good for Lyndon was good for Texas. They knew that. But that didn't mean they liked or respected him. And lots, believe me,
let me ask you a question. I got this great question. I'm trying, can't even tell you where I'm reading it. Come to me. But someone said from Texas came 2 U.S. senators. One came from Brown Root and the other one came from Texaco.
Well, that's a pretty good way of putting it because, believe me, big oil was connected to anyone in politics, anyone that could get under their thumb.
So that probably holds up Brown Root and Texaco.
Yeah.
Well, that was Lyndon.
And like
that was Lyndon. Yeah.
That's overlooking Senator Kerr from Oklahoma, who was tied into big oil too.
That was said about Lyndon Johnson. That,
of course, I know in all fairness, I think you could stop and look at, okay, I've always asked the question, why did the media just fall in line and accept the official version? Why weren't there a few genuine people besides the renegades who would say, wait a minute, this doesn't all add up?
Doesn't add up. Okay,
would the media protect the mafia? Well, the media would owe nothing to the mafia, as far as we would know. Would they protect the government and the military? Well, that's a different question.
Or would they protect Jack Kennedy because they knew? One of the questions is, they knew his private life, and there was, I think, one woman on the entire press corps. And
Helen Thomas.
Thomas, yes. And they were running similar lives. They were World War II guys. They were young. They were aggressive. They loved Jack Kennedy. We know that I think it was Pierre Salinger would come out and salt questions that they could ask. And there was a great relationship, a great working relationship between the Kennedys and the press. The press loved him. Were they protecting him?
Well, I think so to a certain extent, yes, because one, they liked him, most of them.
Yeah.
But number two, they were also protecting themselves because if all of a sudden you start publishing this, someone's going to say, don't tell me you just now found this out.
That's right.
Why didn't you publish it before? And we might have reconsidered whether we were going to vote for this man.
Isn't that true with the way that now we're talking about Joe Biden? Why didn't you say something? You knew that Joe Biden had, his oars were not in the water. Why didn't you say something? And of course, mainstream press did not.
Exactly. And most of it is, this is human beings. It had to do with, I don't want to risk my job.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to risk having an end where I can write all these stories because it builds my reputation. It's me. I think more than protecting the individual, I'm protecting myself and my job.
And that's the Halberstam's book, The Powers That Be, when Schultzberger is brought into Jack Kennedy's office because a young David Halberstam's beginning to write critical pieces for about Vietnam, and Jack Kennedy says to him, he said, "Would this young man Halberstam not be happier in Paris?" In other words, get him out of here.
Yes, exactly. Get him away from where he can get some information I don't want published.
Hang on. Let's put everybody on hold, do a quick turnaround. 303, and we'll try and get some phone calls in. 303-696-1971. 39 will be the high, but it says evening snow. I don't know what's going to happen. Nasty weather, 14 tonight, 30 degrees on Sunday, Monday, 38 degrees. I'm Peter Boyles. David Ellis, you've heard me talk about taking your valuables to David Ellis Jewelers to get a fortune in cash and to secure an appraisal from David for all of those valuables you have tucked away in your home. It is still true. And let me share the other reasons to see David, just in case you don't have a Rolex watch, rare coins, or silver tea sets. You see David for the most meaningful gift-giving occasions. David Ellis Jewelers, just the right items for just the right prices and just the right people that really mean the most to everybody. He's my friend. The antique watches and emerald pennants and gold necklaces and diamond rings. This trusted jeweler has been buying precious metals and antiques in Colorado for decades. Dazzling cases filled with hundreds of new and used pieces that your loved ones will treasure. You visit David Ellis, see for yourself. Look for the black awning on the corner. If he's there now, 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek. Explore DavidEllisJewelry.com or call my friend David Ellis, 303-322-8779, 303-322-8779, and tell David Peter Boyle sent you.
At this hour, I'm Christina Aguayo in Dallas, and here are your top stories. Family members and school communities have identified 9 of the victims killed in the New Year's Day terror attack in New Orleans, where an ISIS-inspired suspect drove a pickup truck through a crowded street before opening fire. Drew Dauphin, a 2023 graduate of Auburn University who worked at the Honda, Alabama auto plant. 25-year-old Billy DeMaio, a recent Auburn University graduate and a New York-based account executive for the media company Audacity. Matthew Tenedorio, a beloved audiovisual technician for the Superdome and a Pearl River Central High School graduate. 21-year-old Herbert Guthrow was confirmed to have lost his life by family members who took to social media announcing his death. He graduated from Shaw High School in 2021. 18-year-old Kareem Badawi, who was attending his freshman year at the University of Alabama. 27-year-old Tiger Besh, the native of Lafayette, Louisiana, was a former Princeton football player and had been working as a junior trader in New York City. 37-year-old Reggie Hunter, a father of an 11-year-old and a 1-year-old, known for his sense of humor. 18-year-old Nakira Dido, a nursing student from Gulfport in South Mississippi, whose mother said she snuck out of the house that night. 28-year-old Nicole Perez, a deli manager who had just moved into a new apartment in Metairie with her 4-year-old son. In Dallas, Christina Aguayo, Salem News Channel.
Morning, everyone. It is a Saturday. It is the 4th morning of January 2025. Good old 710 KNUS. 39 will be the high and 30 on Sunday, and Monday 38 degrees. It's a show I've wanted to do for quite a while. When we passed the anniversary, the assassination of Jack Kennedy on that part of November, we were knee deep in politics, or actually chin deep in politics. And there's been so much talked about conspiracy theory. And we have a wonderful, wonderful guest. I'm a big fan. Katanna's been with us before. Lone Star Speaks is the book. There's an internet floating around discussion taking place about the Zapruder film. And there's a woman, and they call her the Babushka woman. And I was going to bring this up when the show started and then spaced it out, but this is significant. I know you're aware of the, I don't know if it's a problem, but there's a woman in the Babushka who's standing looking right at the Lincoln limousine.
Yes.
Talk to that if you would.
All right. I happened to meet the woman who came forward inadvertently. I'll tell you a little bit of the background on it. A woman named Beverly Oliver was telling a story one time that she had been in Dealey Plaza when Kennedy was killed and seen it. and she happened to be overheard by a very respected researcher from Dallas named Gary Shaw. The more Shaw talked to her, the more he questioned her, the more he was convinced that she was what people, the Babushka woman. And it was based on the fact that he took her to Dealey Plaza, and she walked directly to where photos did show this woman standing. She did say she was wearing a trench coat that day and a scarf over her head, which is where the people got the term Babushka woman. And that at the time she was only about 18 years old. And that she had taken some pictures of the limousine, and that a few days later a Secret Service agent showed up and took them, said she would get them back, and of course she never did. Now, her support system is about 50-50. There are a great many people. She speaks at conferences, and yes, she has a great many supporters who believe everything she says. There are others who don't, and mainly because there is another photo of this, what appears to be this same woman, crossing Elm Street, headed towards the grassy knoll, which Beverly does admit she did. And the picture is, I mean, it's obviously an older woman. It doesn't look like the same younger woman, which Beverly was at the time, who was standing on the curb. So it's like these people didn't change. Now, there is a book out by John Gold called 365 to Dallas, in which he describes a group of women who are out there as detractors. He calls them distractors. And he says one of them was dressed as the Babushka woman, and she was there to lead the crowds to an area where, they shouldn't be going, or away from where the conspirators wanted them to go. So, yeah, we have someone who still claims to this day that was she, and she very well could be. But we have a lot of people who look at that other photograph and say, no, this is an older woman. And that's the way, according to John Gold in his book, the distractors were made up to look, as middle-aged to older women who were just there, spectators.
Well, the internet on this topic is back and forth. People believe, that she. Well, and what did she say that she saw looking at the limo?
Well, actually, not that much more than Mary Moorman and Jean Hill and the Newmans and some of the others saw. But the thing is, she never got to see what her film showed. So that would be the interesting thing. That film has never shown up, if indeed it even existed, because we know that the more photographic evidence we can get, the more we can compare things and see if, for example, see if we have proof that the limousine stopped for a second or two. But so I don't know. Someone asks that often at conferences. Why would someone want to keep you from talking if you haven't seen anything that you shouldn't have seen? And I think part of it is because she has been very adamant that she feels like there was more than one shooter.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what they didn't want evidence of, or they don't like people talking about that. And in all fairness, they make anyone who does say that try to sound like a buffoon if they can.
The church committee, I just finished a book called The Last Honest Man about Frank Church and the church committee. And the church committee, well, there's one more thing too, is this, let me go to this the other thing first, where this now retired Secret Service agent talks about putting the bullet on the on when Kennedy's body's being moved, and he says he has the bullet and the so-called magic bullet, and he just places it on the stretcher. What do you do with that story?
Yeah, that's Secret Service agent Paul Landis.
Yeah.
In our book, The Lone Star Speaks, we had interviewed a man named Gary Locks who lived next door to the driver of the follow-up limousine, and he had become good friends with him. And he had said, Sam Kinney, his name was, that at the Parkland Hospital, and he admitted this, he said, I'm the one who saw the carnage. I'm not sure if there's a better word for it. in the back seat. It was just unbelievably horrific. And he said, all I could think, even as a federal agent, was nobody needs to see this, even though, of course, it was tampering with evidence. And he admitted he asked for a bucket of water and he tried to kind of clean it up, which was terrible. Looking back, oh my gosh, you shouldn't have done that. But he also is the one, he said, he accompanied the limo back in the airplane. He said, I found a bullet that appeared to, seemed to be what we would call the pristine bullet. And he said, I walked in, he found this in the limo as he was cleaning it up. And he said, I was just so disgusted and horrified by the fact that we hadn't been able to prevent this from happening, or that maybe we could prevent it, and we didn't. He said, I walked into the corridor of Parkland and there was a gurney there, and I just tossed the bullet on the gurney. So I have never heard anyone ever say, and there were nurses in the ER trauma room 1, that they found a bullet on the gurney or the operating table where Kennedy was. Someone would have had to have found that. I don't know what to think about that story.
I was going to ask you, well, then what's your conclusion?
I don't know. I don't know whether Paul Landis did that and there was another extra bullet floating around somewhere. It's hard to imagine it would have landed the way he described it, as just lying up there in a crease on the back of where the president's head was. I don't know. None of that makes much sense to me.
The unanswered questions are legion, and it's really springboards. I long believed this, that most of the assassinations and the assassins are explicable. You can explain them. There are people that make things out of them, but by and large, they can be explained. Oswald, just recently we find out about Oswald into Mexico, and they kept all of this stuff away from the Warren Commission. What was the purpose of all of that?
Well, the only thing that makes any logical sense is that, and I think that's the interesting part about possibly the connection to the Navy, is that there were files on Oswald that would have made him look interesting, to say the least, that maybe if they really had some doubts about his character and whether he was a genuine defector, why wouldn't he have been under observation when he was in Dallas and Fort Worth?
Yes.
But it's like there are documents from the CIA, and this is why I keep hoping when Trump will finally release all of them, they won't all be redacted. Yep. That we'll find names like the name of Vice Admiral Rufus Taylor, who worked for the ONI. He had files on Lee Harvey Oswald, and did not obviously either didn't think he was anyone to be concerned about, or he was going to allow him to do whatever. But and there's also another member of the Navy, a guy named Jerome Vassick, who had been in charge of Oswald's files for 3 years. He was never even interviewed by the Warren Commission. It's almost like we don't really want to know more than we have to make our case.
Lyndon Johnson's case is that he wants this commission report, and the same thing was done with the 9/11 Commission. It was a pillow. They wanted to exclude much, to include stuff that wasn't true, to put to rest the anxiety of the American people. Lyndon Johnson, in essence, admits it. So does Hoover. Hoover withholds. And in 1975, the Rockefeller Commission comes up with this panel of experts to review all of it, and they just obviously don't believe a thing that the Warren Commission, and then in 1979 is the House Select, and what am I so I'm so drawn to this. How am I to walk my way through this?
Lord, I don't know, Peter. You're not alone in that feeling.
Yeah.
It's literally overwhelming, and I think they realize that when they created something that's almost a convoluted version of what happened. If you have enough contradictions, I think after a while people are tempted to throw their hands in the air and say, "We'll never solve this. What difference does it make?"
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to believe that. I believe it was Warren. I believe that said he didn't think anybody would even really read the report.
Yes.
Well, he misjudged the American public because so many people have read it. However, I will say this. You'd be surprised how many researchers have said, I haven't ever read it. I'm not going to read that piece of trash. Well, the point is you can't contradict something if you don't know what was said.
Yeah.
You know,
how many volumes?
Material.
I've read one volume, but there's like how many volumes?
26.
Yeah,
26 volumes.
That's enormous.
And Sarah and I were so lucky. We have in Odessa, Texas, which is a sister city to Midland, we have a presidential museum, and it's the only museum in the United States that's devoted to all of the presidents, not just one. And in it, someone had donated the 26 volumes.
Wow.
So I worked there, volunteered with the archivist. So I had access to all their records, anything they had back there. Plus, here were these 26 volumes that we could go over there and just sit there and pour through them. And, you know, some of the stuff is just ridiculous things. You know, things about Ruby's wives or sisters' x-rays on her teeth, who cares? But other things, they just left in little tidbits of information that if you understood who this person was, you could make a note, oh, this goes along with the story about so-and-so. So, you know, you can't tell a lie too big without leaving trails of evidence, of truth.
I just read the one volume that was published for the public, and people began to take that apart almost immediately. Hang on, we'll come right back. Open lines will continue in the next hour. 710 KNUS ski resorts. Boy, there's so much snow up in Winter Park right now, experiencing the best snow conditions, making it perfect time to consider taking your skis and snowboards for a tune, maybe even getting new gear. And so the best winter sports equipment, head over to Larson Ski and Sport, located just south of I-70 on Kipling. So whether you're looking to rent or buy equipment, Larson's has got you covered. They've dedicated themselves to providing you with the best skiing and boarding experiences possible. The convenience of Larson's is unbeatable. It's a perfect stop on your way up or your way down the mountain. You'll find them in a large wooden building next, and it's easy. You get off I-70. You're going westbound on I-70, and you get off on the Kipling exit. You get on the left side. You're getting off on the right side. You come down, be on the left side, come down at the light, make a left, go back under I-70, come out, look right to the west, look to your right, and there it is, big wooden building, Larson Ski and Sport. Trust me, John Marriott and the guys at Larson's, absolute experts at everything they need and you need for winter sports. Stop in today for boards and skis and tell them I sent you boots and warm clothes and helmets and goggles and warm gloves. Larson Ski and Sport, 7 days a week. South of I-70 on Kipling, 303-423-0654, 303-423-0654. But get there and see them 7 days a week. They're there, Larson Ski and Sport, south of I-70 on Kipling, 7 days a week, the best of the best, Larson Ski and Sport. The book is out, Lone Star Speaks. Miss Zachary is with us. Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station on a Saturday morning. 39 will be the high, 30 Sunday, Monday, 38 degrees. Let's go to the phones. Gary, you're on the radio show. Katanna, he's all yours. Gary, you're up.
Thank you. I read your book. I was listening to it when you had her, the nice lady on several months ago, and I read the book. And a couple of the comments I had was you bring out the people that were not interviewed. I mean, like your previous guest said, that she was there, and she reported it, but all the people who were not interviewed, then you and your partner interviewed a lot of people and say, well, this is information that we've never heard before. Why is it just not coming out? And well, nobody ever asked before.
So what's your question, sir?
Well, the idea that, I guess the conspiracy theory kind of thing, who had the most to gain out of all this? And you went through about the 6 different options of people and organizations and whatnot. And in my opinion, Johnson had the most to gain out of all this. And then you talk about no longer having Cuba in the picture, but yet the military-industrial complex during the Southeast Asia conflict just thrived. And from what I read, Lady Bird Johnson had a hand or a lot of options in the companies that benefited the most from the Southeast Asia war. So it's just little things like that just bugged me.
It was, and Gary, I love the call. I think it's more about the organized crime CIA Connect, that if these stories are true, that Jack Kennedy was going to break up the CIA, and if his brother Bob was going to really prosecute the organized crime characters, the Hoffas and the rest of it, that if you got rid of them, that was the great gain. But you're right about Lyndon Johnson. I mean, Lyndon Johnson, I don't know if you ever read the Carno books, Lone Star Rising and any of those books.
Right. Yep.
But his dad was just a West Texas dirt farmer, wasn't he? Katanna, wasn't that just what he did?
Basically, yeah.
And he ended up owning the radio stations and television station, and
right.
He never had a real job.
Well, Gary, I think you make a good point that nobody can say Johnson didn't have a great deal to gain. He was desperate, and there's a new book out called LBJ's Mortal Wound by Bob Nelson that talks about how close Johnson was coming to probably being forced out of the vice presidency, if not possibly being prosecuted. But he wasn't the only one, and there were other groups of people who would also have gained. And that's why this is such an intriguing idea, that why wouldn't people who didn't normally have much in common work together if they had a common enemy? Because you're right. Whoever did this did not want to destroy the Democratic Party, because they could have revealed some of JFK's affairs, and that would have been the end of his reelection. But that would have also taken down the Democratic Party, at least temporarily. So this was someone who didn't mind LBJ becoming president as long as they got what they wanted.
The pilot of Air Force One actually slapped Lyndon Johnson, according to other books, that Lyndon Johnson got on the airplane and was in panic and saying they're going to kill us all. They're going to kill us all. And he was bird colonel. He stood up, and as the story goes, he slapped Lyndon Johnson and told him.
See, I find it very hard to ever see Lyndon Johnson panicking over much of anything.
You and I. Yeah. But that story's out there that he smacked him. And so if he was in on the inside, does that sound like a guy who's on the inside?
No, obviously not. But he could be a darn good actor when he needed to be.
That's true too.
Yeah. Two questions, if you would. Afterwards, Johnson as president and Hoover CIA. what was the relationship they had as far as, the interaction between Johnson and Hoover when he became president?
They were
And then
friends.
the other question I had is, in your book, Lee Harvey Oswald, within 15 minutes of the shot being fired, they had a description of the clothing he was wearing, and the police were on the lookout for him. And then that's when Tibbetts got shot. But then how did they know so quick after the assassination what Harvey was wearing?
Well, how could they know unless someone had been there in the depository whose job was to tell the police what Lee Harvey Oswald was wearing?
Yeah.
Yes. So,
otherwise, there's no way they could have known that.
So conspiracy all the way.
So real quick,
like that.
Gary, you're a great caller. What do you believe in a nutshell? Was it?
I think that Johnson and the CIA were cooperating, and the control that they had over the Dallas Police Department as far as who they could interview, who they couldn't interview, and the people that were interacting there at the local scene, and then the follow-up afterwards, it just went nowhere.
Katanna, who do you believe?
Listen, I think it was a group effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody had to be able to cover it up. Somebody had to be able to plan it. Someone had to execute it. And as long as it wasn't all the same people, it made it much more difficult to point a finger at anyone.
Well, your book, Texas Speaks, is a wonderful book, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading it.
One more question before everybody gets away. Now, do you believe Donald Trump is going to show the papers?
I hope so, but I'm afraid they're going to be so redacted that all we'll be looking at is dates and places.
Yeah, a lot of black lines.
Lots of black. Yeah.
Yeah. Gary, thank you for your call. So as we end this, and this, notion of conspiracy and coming back full circle to RFK Jr., how much input do you think RFK Jr. will have in having now truth told, if indeed truth has been suppressed?
Well, I think it always helps to have someone who can say, look, I've got information that the rest of you don't have. I know how my father, the Attorney General, felt. I know how the Kennedy, well, of course, he's at odds with the Kennedy family, but he still would know how his mother had felt, things of that nature, and said, I know that they thought this was a shoddy investigation because my father said so. So let's do something about it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, it's going to be a ride. January, February, and March, if all of this comes out and you watch what happens next. Thank you. And we'll probably follow up with you if, in fact, some of these documents are released. I think it'll be a whale of a time. You take care of yourself.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, ma'am, as always. Oh, real quick, do the publisher and how people can get the book. You
can always get it through Amazon. If you'd like signed copies, I can give you my email, kwzachry, Zachry, @yahoo.com. And the publisher is Bancroft Press. You can always get it through them.
Do it one more time. Say those things one more time.
Okay. It's always available unsigned through Amazon. If you'd like a signed copy, my email is kwzachry @yahoo.com. And then you can order it from our publisher, Bancroft Press.
Mm-hmm. I will talk to you soon. Let's see what happens in January and February. Take care of yourself. Happy New Year, ma'am, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We take the turn and come back. We'll do a couple of hours of open lines. It's a Saturday morning, the 4th of January, 2025, 710 KNUS. 39 will be the high. Snow this evening, 30 on Sunday, Monday, 38 degrees. Theories of history and trying to understand history through theories. And we sort of opened the show that way. I'm drawn to it. And now it is conspiracy theory. And conspiracy has played out before. John Kennedy and assassination conspiracy theories, the assassination of John Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963, numerous conspiracy theories. The theories allege the involvement of the CIA, the mafia, of Lyndon Johnson, just heard, Cuban. He was prime minister, I think, was Castro's title. KGB. And now even this morning, now when in watching the sadness and the fallout of the things that happened, and not the one that was in particular is the master sergeant and retired from the Army and talked about his girlfriend, and they're talking about that's a conspiracy already. The attempts on Donald Trump, the election with Donald Trump, the COVID, the injections from COVID, all considered now a conspiracy theory. What do you do with all of this? 303-696-1971. And of course, the Kennedy stuff's open for conversation. So lines are wide open, 303-696-1971. Go into the third hour. I'm Peter Boyles. This is 710 KNUS. What a couple of hours of talk radio that was. Good morning, everyone. It's a Saturday, the 4th of January, 2025. I'm Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. Our weather, evening snow, 39 will be the high today. It's foggy out there, 14 degrees tonight, 30 degrees Sunday, and on Monday, 38 degrees, 303-696-1971. And I just want to say open lines. Let's go to work. It has been an amazing couple of hours of talk. The first hour of open lines was out on the limb as far as it could be. The second hour was where it was with Katanna. I don't know what to do except we'll just go to work. Throw me some names up there and we'll go.
Terry on line one.
Who?
Line one, Terry.
Terry. All right. Start with line one with Terry. There are two lines open, 303-696-1971. Terry, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Peter. I so enjoyed the last hour. And I have a story that happened a year before the assassination. My father was a colonel in the Army, and he was at the Pentagon. And he was commissioned with a general and 7 other officers in the summer of '62 to go to Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, to really assess the situation. They were told that John Kennedy wanted to really understand if we should become more involved in that situation. My father was gone for a month. And when they came back, they had a report and they went to the Oval Office. It was the general, my father, and 1 other officer. They went into the Oval Office, excuse me, and John Kennedy was sitting. His back, he had back problems. So they sat down in front of the desk and they put the report on the desk, and he used a ruler to scoot it toward him. And my father and the other gentleman explained the report to him. And basically the conclusion was, in a way, I'm kind of perhaps defending the military today a little bit. The report was not to go any further into the area at all. And the 3 reasons were, number 1, you can't win a defensive war. And the military was not allowed to go further into the north because of the threat of China. The second reason, Daddy said, was the people themselves had no interest, the South Vietnamese, in helping. And the third reason was they told him it really doesn't threaten in any way the United States. So he accepted the report, and a few days later, they were told to go to McNamara's office. And the 3 went back, and they were in the office, and he was about to talk to them. McNamara was, and my father always thought it was staged. He feels like McNamara already knew what the conclusion of the report was, because at some point within 5 minutes, someone came in and said, "Oh, sir, you have a phone call." And so McNamara said to the 3 of them, "I'm sorry, I can't talk about this right now. Y'all are going to have to go." And they were never asked back to McNamara's office to explain the conclusions. So a year later, my father was the commander of the Arctic Test Center. So we were in Alaska when President Kennedy was assassinated. And my father was very, very upset. And he always believed that if he had lived, and probably it isn't just Daddy, but a lot of people believe this, if he had lived, the escalation and all of those young men that sacrificed their lives and died there, it wouldn't have happened. He felt at the meeting, the first meeting, that he was very receptive to their conclusions, and that's what happened.
Yeah, Robert McNamara authorized the Pentagon Papers, which was such a for Nixon, such a problem for Nixon. But the Pentagon Papers were a study, and had really nothing to do with Nixon, except it just was exposed. It exposed everything that Lyndon Johnson had done, and it was put together by none other than Robert McNamara, who in fact never read the Pentagon Papers. And those were the ones that, remember, they broke into David Ellsberg's psychiatrist office. And and it goes back into what one of the callers talked about in the first hour, where this group, the Watergate burglars, they were called plumbers because they were stopping leaks. Which I always thought, somebody taken a piece of paper and wrote plumbers on it and put it on their door. They were the leak stoppers. But I find Robert McNamara and in many ways he's a Rumstead character. He's willing to do the work, but he was brought over from Ford Motor Company. By he was brilliant. He was one of the whiz kids of Ford Motor Company, Irish, brought over by Jack Kennedy and made Secretary of Defense. As I said, didn't write the Pentagon Papers, but in essence had them constructed. And then what he is one of those operashniks, I think the Soviets used to call them. But your dad was right on the money. I mean, they knew early on that it wasn't going to work, but it didn't matter to them. And it's the same thing with watching the insanity of the invasion of Iraq. What was
right? That's right. What's so sad about this? It's so obvious. It was all politics. It was a political decision to send all these men and go over there and have everything happen. It wasn't the military that really thought that it was wise.
Well, it does become that, and that's why the same thing that what Rumstead did too. That if you would not go along with Rumstead's theories,
you mean Donald Rumsfeld?
Yeah, Rumsfeld. I said Rumstead. I'm sorry, Rumsfeld. During when they were rising up to invade Iraq, and he would destroy people's careers. Lyndon Johnson was always looking for the guy that would answer to Lyndon Johnson the answer that he wanted. Rumsfeld, that he wanted to hear that answer, and
I agree with that.
And they knew who to send in. I mean, it's and if Donald Trump does what he says he's going to do, especially
that'll be a good day.
Especially when we get a chance to see the documents that have been suppressed.
Yes.
And that's so significant. And I like I said, I don't know if it will happen. I sure hope, because it would answer so many questions that are just hanging out there. That
I know it. Thank you so much, Peter, for all the good work you're doing on this subject.
Thank you, ma'am. Who's on two?
Patrick from Austin, Texas.
Oh, Patrick in Austin, Texas. You're on the radio show. Good morning.
Good morning, my brother. How you doing?
Hey, my boy. I ride motorcycles with this guy. Hey, man, how are you?
Okay, so I had a call. I'm doing great, man. Good. Happy New Year to you and your show.
Yeah.
I heard it's doing good.
Thank you.
Get to listen to it sometimes, but
thank you.
So, have you seen? I know we talked about this like years ago on one of our rides or whatever, but have you seen the Smoking Gun documentary? And I think I asked you about this, and it's basically that one of the Secret Service guys accidentally shot him. And they covered that up.
Yes.
Down. It was a trail. It was a trail limo or, car trailing behind Kennedy. So when I saw that documentary, I was kind of like convinced, like that makes a lot of sense.
Well, there is the Zapruder film is the guy's standing there, and I think Zapruder's a Super 8, and he shoots the Super 8 and he captures it. And there are people now that you can see on the internet who tell you or who show you that film has been doctored that the Zapruder film itself
Right.
has been doctored. Now, you and I had this. I remember when we had this conversation. I remember where we were. We were sitting at biker bar that was over on 44th, and you and I were. Yeah, yes, that's right. We were sitting there, and
don't incriminate us right now. You're
incriminating us. I don't drink.
We had lunch, anyways.
I don't think either one of us
But
drink.
it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. No, but
it kind of makes sense because people down at the level of where Kennedy was, the street level smelled gunpowder, so that kind of like jives with that whole, Secret Service person, agents shooting him accidentally, and that's the reason why they covered it up is like, how could because that was a fatal shot, right? The headshot.
Well, the problem was he was shot more than once. That's the only problem I have with that. With when you started talking about that, there was
but I'm not saying Oswald was still involved, but what I'm saying is I think that fatal shot came from the Secret Service.
After Jack Kennedy was shot, and this is back to all of this, the people suspected the assassination was part of a larger plot. And people speculated that the Dallas, quote, right-wingers were involved, and Ruby's murder of Oswald compounds all of that, because why then does Jack Ruby go in and shoot Lee Harvey Oswald? And I don't know. I mean, Jack Kennedy is dead, but one of the things I think that is for sure is that there is a connection between organized crime and Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby had a strip bar in Dallas, and if you were in that business in Texas, then you were involved in the Texas Mafia, and that was really controlled by the New Orleans Mafia. And so, but they have all these names. Right. We have all these names of all these people. You know what? This is a very dear friend. And Patrick, I don't know. I mean, before I even started the show this morning, I'm thinking, well, is this really the one we want to do? But the House Select Committee on Assassinations, that was in 1979, I think, agreed that Oswald, they conclude the commission's report and the original FBI investigation were flawed, and it concluded that at least 4 shots were fired. And that's what I was getting to that. And with a high probability, the 2 gunmen fired at Jack Kennedy, and the conspiracy was probable. That was 1979. Right. That was, they called it what? HSCA, I think it was called. And the Warren Commission failed to investigate the possibility of a conspiracy to assassinate the president. What I believe is if you could do that, and this brings us, sort of full circle. I never heard the term the deep state. I heard there's been all kinds of different terms have been used, the establishment or the shadow government or different things, but the idea that a deep state exists and it could do what it did, then why can't it do much more than just that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And to add to that, it's just like, how can we get conspiracies right? The government can, and they mess up everything else. It's like they're really good on covering up everything. But I'm telling you, this one still keeps me up at night. I know we've talked about this over the years
many times.
That I don't even want to talk about the John Benet Ramsey case. That still keeps me up. But I'm still trying to solve the Kennedy assassination. So you got to give me a break here.
But again, the reason I try to launch this show, and it's taken off in 18 different directions, but the conspiracy theory is the Kennedy assassination conspiracy theory, the mother of all conspiracies. Maybe you could say that, or call it, or the idea that does this amorphous deep state exist, And can it do what it did? I mean, I don't know how many books have been written about the assassination of Jack Kennedy. Somebody said there's been 1,000 books written. I'm sure that's probably true. But if they do exist, and so now you have Donald Trump saying that he's going to show or release the rest of these documents, and we can only hope that's true. But the Warren report is a joke. Public opinion polls, I got this in front of me. I'll read it to you. This is the Gallup poll. This is last year. Decades later, most Americans doubt lone gunman killed JFK. 60 years after President John F. Kennedy is assassinated, a broad majority of Americans continue to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone, but rather that others were involved in the conspiracy to kill the president. That's pretty significant.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
And
yeah.
if that
Totally
organization exists, does it still exist?
Well, I think it's when we give the name, we give it so many names. The deep state, the good old boy system. We just don't. It's just an element that is not really organized, but it kind of is.
What and can it do that and get away with it?
Right.
It was said by Benjamin Franklin that 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Yet, how many people allegedly know the truth? Quite a few, apparently. But it is amazing when you read through the mid-'70s through the early 2000s, more and more and more Americans believe in the conspiracy, but more and more crazy things are happening in the world that would make you go back and believe the conspiracy. And I mean, I swear, I mean, if we were to know what happened to John Kennedy, we would know what happened to a lot of other things as well.
I agree. Yeah.
We can't ride. It's too cold to ride up here, man. It's too cold.
Yeah, I know. We can. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
That's why I left Colorado, man. I couldn't stand the winters anymore, but I missed the riding season during spring, summer, and fall over there. So.
I love you. I'll talk to you this afternoon. Take care. Thank you.
All right, brother.
303-696-1971 is our phone number. Now, this is where I was headed. We went through an hour of open lines, and first hour that was pretty nuts, and then the second hour with a great guest. Now the third hour. Does this organization, I don't know what else to call it, does it exist? The this conception of history, this manifestation, this plan that can do what it wants to do. Does it exist? And did it get away with this? Because we're talking about it again, and it keeps coming up all the time on talk radio. It comes up by politicians' speeches, comes up on internet statements. It comes up in blogs that, okay, this thing that was able to turn away Donald Trump the first time, or rather the second time, turn away Hillary Clinton maybe the first time, there is pretty much enough established evidence to talk about how Jack Kennedy did win that election against Nixon, and did organize crime win that election for him. And I believe it did. I personally believe in West Virginia and Chicago that they brought the election through for Jack Kennedy. It was one of the motivators to end his life, was he owed them. And you don't owe these people and not pay them. And he owed them. So is it possible? And is it the whole, I've been reading a lot about the COVID vaccination. Do you think the COVID vaccination was placed in there for a reason to be able to do these things? Do you think it's all being able to be done that way? 710 KNUS, it is your turn. 303-696-1971. I know it's a show this is a show I've been wanting to do. And so here we are. Our Danny Kaplis' law firm. And Dan, again, I don't know how long we've been friends. I did his radio show right before the holidays. And Danny suggests, and it's true, that you should choose a lawyer who shares your values. And because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says so much about you and everybody involved in the case. We talk about Dan's growing up and about his dad and his mom. Danny's believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Danny's also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Dan Kaplis Law, the official law firm partner of the Nuggets and of the Colorado Avalanche. Dan Kaplis Law is a serious firm for serious cases. Danny accepts righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis. He can represent good people from all walks of life without regard of ability to pay. If you need his help, he came through for my family. I can only tell you about my experience, and it was incredible. 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. On the internet, it's Dan Kaplis Law, CAPLIS law.com. Please do yourself a favor. 303, if you got just even a question about something that happened, 303-770-5551. 303-696-1971. Is it out there? Does it exist? Most Americans doubt the lone gunman killed JFK. That isn't the point of the show. The point of the show, I think, is more so about this amorphous creature, this theory of conspiracy that runs the show. And I'm drawn to it. What do you want to do here? You want to pause? Take a break. Okay. There is one line open, 303-696-1971. It's going to be one of those days. 39 will be the high, 14 degrees tonight, 710 KNUS.
At this hour, I'm Christina Awayo in Dallas, and here are your top stories. A middle school teacher in Ohio has been awarded $450,000 after being forced to resign for refusing to use pronouns. It all started in August of 2022 when Vivian Garrity refused to use the preferred names and pronouns of 2 transgender students because of her religious beliefs and continued using their birth names and pronouns. The students emailed Garrity telling her to stop, then reported her to a school counselor. That's when the school forced her to resign from her position of teaching language arts. So she sued the district for violating her First Amendment right. A U.S. district court agreed with Garrity, ruling that forcing Garrity to call the students by their preferred names was, quote, compelled speech, and that the pronoun policy at the school was not neutral. The organization that represented Garrity, the Alliance Defending Freedom, said no school official can force a teacher to set her religious beliefs aside in order to keep her job. President Joe Biden is getting ready to issue a decree permanently banning new offshore oil and gas development in some U.S. coastal waters, locking in difficult-to-revoke protections for sensitive marine areas during his final weeks in the White House. Biden is set to issue the executive order banning the sale of new drilling rights in portions of the country's outer continental shelf, according to people familiar with the effort who asked not to be named because the decision isn't public. In Dallas, Christina Awayo, Salem News Channel.
There's a line open, and it's a Saturday morning, January 4th, 2025. This is 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. We are Denver's talk station. 39 is all we get today. All right, we go here. Frank in Evergreen. Frank, thanks, man. You're on the show.
Hey, good morning, Peter.
Morning, sir.
I've been in and out of the conversation, so I may have missed some of this, but I'd like to draw a couple distinctions. One is there's a big distinction between the two sides of the NSA. One is the acquisition, the data acquisition distinction, which is actually Colorado has a big piece of that. If you look out at Buckley Field, you'll see those golf balls out there. That's what they do. I'd like to distinguish those folks who do that work from the people like Leon Panetta who go into the archives and stuff documents down their pants and take them out. You know, there's very good work that is done by the NSA on the acquisition side that is the only thing keeping us ahead of China and the rest of the world at this point. But the problem is with like Tulsi Gabbard, who's taken over leadership here in a few days. You know, she's a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and she was put on the do not fly list. How does that happen, Peter? I have no idea.
Yeah,
and I'm really looking forward to seeing what RFK Jr. has to say, because he believes in his heart of hearts that his uncle and father killed.
He never said his father, but I believe he believes the same people that killed his uncle killed his dad.
Yeah.
No. Okay, let me stop you right there. Who are those people? I mean, forget, if you would, the others that you mentioned, but something as significant as an assassination. Who are those people?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking forward to finding out myself.
Yeah, well, but have they existed, and do they exist, and have they existed? If so, for how long?
I would say yes. Not the same. It changes every administration, right?
Well, it has to not. I mean, that's, again, it gets back into understanding history when there's so-called theories of history. Marx had, people that have, I've listened to people on radio shows saying that God got Donald Trump elected, God intervenes, God's plan. The Marxists believe something else altogether. The great man theory, the great brain theory, the great people theory, all these different theories. But if in fact they're all meaningless, that what really can happen has happened and will happen again.
I agree with you, and I think that I'm looking forward to Tulsi Gabbard taking over and maybe drawing some lines. And but I just my main reason I called is to let you know that, and let the viewers know that there are distinctly different parts of the NSA, NRO, and all that. And the really important part that we need to be careful about protecting is what happens out in those golf balls out in Buckley Field.
But these people are rogues. These aren't. If it is what I'm led to believe, these are rogue factors. These are not. This isn't.
You would hope so.
Well, if not, then why? Well, if it's not been told before. But the idea of an elite, perhaps, or Plato talked about philosopher kings, that you could only see their shadows on the walls of the caves. Do they exist? Yeah. But who are they?
Well, each administration comes in and, they come in complaining about that. And then when they get in, they say, oh, I can use this for my own good. And that's the absurdity of it all. It's got to end. We got, and bananas.
Your
If
phone.
you or I were to do what if you or I were to do what Banana did, you'd be in jail.
Your phone's breaking up. I'm going to say thanks. Thank you very much. We have a line open. We go to Dino. It's Saturday morning. Dino, you're on the show. Good morning.
Hey, Professor Boyles, how are you, man?
Hey,
Happy
man,
New Year.
Thank you. You too.
Still in Arkansas. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. I took care of some sick relatives in Mississippi. I'd rather be in Arkansas. Well, I was there over the Christmas week. Say, before you, a few weeks ago, you had a boxing expert on. I'll talk about a couple of things in a minute. It was good. It was a good listen. But about this, obviously, when Ike Pappas held the mic and Ruby shot Oswald, obviously it's to shut him up. I mean, a 2-year-old kid would know that. I was at that time.
Well, yeah,
That's one.
but was he sent in? Was Jack Ruby sent in to silence Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yeah, I think he was mobbed up, so they probably gave the order.
Yeah.
And also, I think the same principle is infuriated the later generations. How come Bin Laden was given a quick burial at sea? They didn't want to. They could have captured him, of course, or shot. Well, I guess they killed him. They could have They want him dead to make sure he was shut up. But, Hussein was the big one. They could have captured him alive, brought him back to you, and just find out something. They knew he'd spill beans. So it's so obvious.
The same thing. Remember, the third person is a minor leaguer, but compared to, they had Che Guevara.
Well, yeah.
And they paid the guy to go in and shoot Che Guevara. And by the way, they cut Che Guevara's hands off, and they also cut Osama bin Laden's hands off.
Supposed to be tradition burial stuff.
But those two in particular, why didn't they bring them back and have a Nuremberg type trial? Well, you couldn't allow that to happen.
No, of course, they have too much to talk about.
All right, so is there or does there exist in outside of major? It does exist, I guess, in major theories of history. But does this exist?
Yeah, I know who really runs it on. Maybe it changes from one caller previously said administration. But yeah, I think it sort of does. Yeah, you're not gonna be able to prove all of this stuff. You just get everyone. There's only one person alive that could maybe elaborate a little bit about Kennedy's assassination. She refuses to talk the whole time, and that's Angie Dickinson. She's still alive. She doesn't mention a word about it. And she was with him a lot of times.
Yeah.
So that's it. Everyone else involved in any type of in that case, as far as the wiretap and everything, Marilyn Monroe, they're all dead. How are you gonna prove this stuff?
And I believe they killed her.
Oh, yeah. 36-year-old woman, gorgeous like her. She couldn't drink enough. It wasn't like Jean Harlow. You drink enough to wipe out your liver at that age.
No.
So yeah, sure.
And it was. And I believe that I believe Bob Kennedy was there and part of what happened to Marilyn Monroe and how she died.
Well, yeah, it's been I wouldn't say confirmed, but all the police, all the officers, authorities at the time thought she was that morning going to call a press conference. I'm mentioning about both Kennedys at the time, and she never did.
They found,
whacked her.
I don't know, 4 or 5 different wiretaps in her house, and they had taken her body out and had to take it back in again. And Bobby Kennedy was there, and I mean, but that's the part of it that takes you to that point of when you think of John F. Kennedy's assassination conspiracy theories. But then with the trying to understand history, if it said, okay, if that existed then, does it now exist and has it operated since?
Well, that's how they get money. In Kennedy's case, originally, I guess, well, if it was the CIA, which probably, that's another consensus. He was prepared to just take any United States troops out. He was going to stop the Vietnam. He was going to just pull out and say, "Hey, screw it." And then they wanted the economy would keep going if they, of course, Johnson, if they made all the money just by having the economy, the war being a war machine.
But when we talked about it with Katanna, is the whole thing stops. I mean, the whole anti-Castro, Alpha 66, Omega 7, CIA, organized crime, every attempt to overthrow the Castros ends. And when it ends, and I just finished, not just, but in the last 6-8 months about what they did to Khrushchev. I never knew about the ending of Khrushchev's career.
Right.
And they were waiting.
Yeah, I didn't know Brezhnev took over that way either. I know Khrushchev. I thought it was his age.
No, they were
He was
waiting
getting up there. Yeah,
they're waiting
Yeah.
for him. They had KGB guys with AKs, and he came back from a tour of a collective, and he and his wife, and they took them both. Wow. All right, man.
What
Love
can you say?
Thanks.
Have a good one.
All right.
Take it easy, Peter.
We good on time? We're good on time? Okay. We go to Dawn. We'll take Dawn in Lakewood. We have a line open. Dawn, you're on the radio show Saturday morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Pete.
Morning, sir.
Very, very interesting calls.
Yeah.
So Alan Dulles is number 5 in the appointment list for the CIA. First guy was Rear Admiral Sidney Sauer.
All right.
And there were 3 more after that. I find all this very interesting, the different things that I've read, the authors, and you hear different names dropped. Some of the books influenced me a lot, like Dr. Mary's Monkey.
Me too. I love that.
Mary's Mosaic.
Yep.
We're not hearing anything about Cord Meyer and where he was at. There's just so much depth there, and I've done so much reading on this topic.
First of all, love the call. Can I shoot you the questions?
Sure.
All right. Who killed John Kennedy?
Probably a combination of Chuck Nicoletti, Hunt, and somebody else.
Who?
Am I hitting anything there, Pete?
Does that organization still exist?
Some faction of it.
What's it known as?
Man, I don't know. I've never thought of that. Who would it be?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to put you on. I'm not trying to put you on a spot.
I know what. I'll think about that, and I'll talk to you again. I'll remember that one.
All right.
What would I call today's group? So, do you remember Bill Hayes, the CIA guy?
Yes.
Him, Handsome Johnny, Giancana.
Yeah.
All them people.
And look what happened. But Giancana gets murdered. They get rid of Momo. They get rid of everybody that there are people that got rid of them because of the people who they got rid of. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. And plus that, you had the church committee when they were coming on.
They had them.
They couldn't take a chance on them guys.
Nope. Frank Church.
They had to snuff them guys because those guys were old and they were getting ready to make deals, save their old asses.
Yep.
Old lives.
Well, Frank Church was again was dubbed the last honest man, and that the church committee were the ones that pointed out there was like more than one. There was 4 shots fired and all the different things that they came away with, and they said, yeah, there was another shooter, and then people dismissed it. But apparently, according to this Gallup poll that I have in front of me, although it's a year old, most Americans doubt the lone gunman killed JFK. That's significant. But then move it forward. Does it exist again now, and did it exist prior to killing John Kennedy? I love this.
There has just been so much crap that we have had blown up our kazoos over the time in history. The beautiful thing, I was telling somebody the other day that I like especially now, especially Trump, is now we have time. So now we're really starting to understand maybe what the real history was with all this crap.
Sure.
And now he gets the right people. I'm such a fan of Kash Patel. I read his book, Government Gangsters.
Yeah.
I learned a lot more than I knew about him. Nunes, Grinnell, Pam Bondi.
Yeah.
Are these people able to run and let Trump go on this private revenge tour, have his people do it? It's going to get interesting, Pete.
You watch, and they're historians.
They break open that January 6th crap. That January 6th crap too.
Well,
look where Ray Epps is. Where's Ray Epps?
No,
now?
Ray Epps is maybe in Colorado. Winky, winky. He's in an RV.
Yeah.
Look, Ray Epps got misused.
Well,
but
when Christopher Wray came out and said, "Well, yeah, we did have some people that weren't really working." Bingo.
But Ray
Why
Epps,
did you always say we don't have anybody hired?
But Ray Epps, that video that floated around was from the day before. Look, I mean, the stuff is, you start pushing it out on the edges when it's going to come back and it's going to boomerang, because that's what somebody's looking for. I think when we have something, and again, we're talking about something that happened years and years and years ago, but is it the only thing that ever happened that way? And that's the question that I have is,
how'd Marilyn Monroe die, Pete?
I believe that Bob Kennedy, she was calling the White House, and Bobby.
How did she physically die?
I think upper rectum. I think they put drugs in her rectum so they wouldn't show up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cannabinol and some other drug.
Yeah.
And then they staged her, just like they did Dorothy Kilgallen.
Dorothy Kilgallen was murdered, and she was the other.
Yeah, but they suicided her.
Well, they
did a bad job.
And they did a very bad job. There's a number of these unsolved murders of people that were connected to the Kennedy assassination, and it's legit. Marilyn Monroe died, of course, before he did, but she had to go. She was calling. Actually, she spoke to Jackie Kennedy on the phone, and Jackie.
Well, she also made big waves up the Cal Neva. And
say it again. I didn't hear you. I missed it. Say it again.
She was making big waves up at the Cal Neva with Sinatra and them people.
Well,
she was running her mouth a lot.
What they did at the Cal Neva to her was, and Sam Giancana was that, and they rode her like a horse in the hallways of the Cal Neva. Love your call. It's a good call. Very good call, man. Thank you very much.
Koreatown.
Here we go. 710 KNUS. We are Denver's talk station. Stay here. The Sultans. Sultans play Creole. 7:10 KNUS Saturday morning, the 4th of January. First year, 2025. Here we go again. 303-696-1971 with full lines. 39 will be the high, 30 on Sunday. Monday, 38 degrees. We're close to the turn. It's going to be tough to start a call. We have to put somebody on hold. So lines are jammed. Everybody stay there. The ski resorts are getting pounded with snow and better snow conditions daily, making it a perfect time to consider taking your skis and snowboards for a tune, or maybe even getting new gear for you didn't get what you wanted for Christmas. Head to Larson's now. The best winter sports equipment. Head over to Larson's Ski and Sport, located just south of I-70 on Kipling. So whether you're looking to rent or buy equipment with little kids, again, rent, because next year at this time, their feet are going to be bigger. Larson's got you covered. They're dedicated to providing you with the best skiing experience possible. The convenience of Larson's is unbeatable. Perfect stop way up the hill, or perfect stop when you did something wrong and you're coming home. So you're westbound on I-70, and here comes the Kipling exit. Get off the Kipling exit, come down the ramp, make a left, come underneath the highway. There's a tunnel, comes right under I-70. Come on the other side. Look to your right. You see a big wooden building. That's south of I-70 on Kipling. There it is. Larson Ski and Sport. John Marriott and his son Jack and Paul and everybody there, the guys at Larson's, absolutely the experts at everything you need for winter sports. Stop in today for helmets and warm gloves and just whatever you need. Even got LJ's, got the long underwear that you need because you're going to love, because you're going to be on the lift and you're going to be cold, and say, boy, I'm glad I got these. Stop in today and tell them I sent you. Larson Ski and Sports, south of I-70 on Kipling. Phone number is 303-423-0654, 303-423-0654. Larson Sport, Larson Sport.com. All right, hit it and get it, and let's come back on the other side and start another hour of open lines. I'm Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. Morning, everybody. Actually, good afternoon, everybody. We just crossed the line, 710 KNUS. We are Denver's talk station. I'm Peter Boyles. Good to have you all here on a Saturday, January 4, 2025. Phone numbers and the lines are jammed, 303-696-1971. I'm trying to set this show up, and I've been thinking about doing this show for quite a while, and we couldn't have not done it there in November, the month of John Kennedy's assassination. He was assassinated 22nd of November of 63. But the idea of history and understanding history and theories of history and this amorphous creature that crawls through the deep state or the establishment or the shadow government. And that was the one place that it shows if, in fact, the kinds of things that I believe are true. History carries with it theories. If you read history and study history, you know that there's theories. Why does history, how does it work? And Plato and Aristotle looked at it a certain way, and there were the people that were the human nature theorists. There's the best people theory, and now we get to the great mind, the great man. And you're still looking for a place where all of this fits in. The great mind theory easily slides into the notion, but then there are the other ones that come in too. The great man theory, that's the one that Adolf Hitler, in fact, believed. But also comes with it, the great man theory emerges, and then finally God, the God theory. And I've heard many times on talk shows that God intervened and got Donald Trump elected. So we hear these things. But what about this one? This idea that there is a conspiracy theory that can run through this. And if it existed then, why could it not exist now? Or did it exist before? And this has been an amazing show. I keep sitting back after calls and think, okay, where are we headed? I have this theory that, of course, talk radio has no man its master. But this show was really interesting today. I have to re-listen to it and think about it. So we go to Terry. Our lines are jammed. Terry, I appreciate you waiting. Good afternoon. You're on the show.
Pete, this just broke in the New York Post, and just give me a second to go
Sure.
through it. Just quickly read through the article, and you need to read this. This just broke today. Headline: Manhattan DA won't investigate famed journalist Dorothy Kilgallen's 1965 death, but Hollywood will set to suggest foul play. And she was investigating, apparently, doing you know about, deep dive into the assassination, and she suspiciously apparently died in 65.
Yes.
Okay, now let me lay this on you real quick. Let me go down in the paragraph.
You got it?
She's saying, or what she was trying to say was, let me see here. Here it is. Okay. Kilgallen's, Kilgallen, is that how you sell, her name is Kilgallen?
Yeah, Kilgallen, yes.
Okay. Kilgallen said 18-month investigation led her to suspect that the New Orleans Mafia, Don Carlos Marcello, masterminded the JFK and Oswald killings, Shaw wrote. She said, I am going to break the real story and have the biggest scoop of the century. The journalist is quoted as telling her lawyer, but she confided to friends she feared for her safety. At Shaw's urging, Bragg's predecessor, Cyrus Vance, briefly opened a court case on Kilgallen in 2017, but dropped it. So I want you to read it because it's apparently Hollywood's going to do a movie on this.
Oh, wow.
And this just broke today. This was just released in the New York Post today on the 4th. So you not want to read it. But she's saying that the guy down in New Orleans may have been behind all this, and makes sense because of the Ruby thing, right?
Well, yeah. Carlos Marcello ran New Orleans, but the mafia in New Orleans also then controlled Dallas. It was a big, like a bubble laying on its side. And there was no Don, the strength of a Carlos Marcello. Bobby Kennedy deported him to Guatemala. put him out of the country. Dorothy Kilgallen was killed in, I think, a year after Jack Kennedy, and she was writing numbers of pieces about the New Orleans connection, and that's when Jim Garrison, and that's why nobody that really significantly reads believes Jim Garrison, who Kevin Costner played Jim Garrison.
Right.
Nobody buys into that, but Kilgallen had worked. Wow, and she used to be on television on I think What's My Line. I'd see her. She's very sophisticated, and she is believed to have spoken with Jack Ruby, and she went and she talked to. She had this conversation about the assassination of Jack Kennedy with Jack Ruby, and again, here we go. So her last assassination, she was going to publish, I think, in '65, and what you said was true. I've heard that same line before, and she was found dead in Manhattan, and her death was alcohol and barbiturates.
And they say that's suspicious in other people's opinion. So
That's how Marilyn Monroe was killed.
right. So there you. I mean, I don't know, like you said, but I always had an issue with, okay, all of a sudden this guy comes out of nowhere, Ruby, and shoots.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
That's bothered me forever. That whole thing about that whole assassination is, why does all of a sudden this guy appears and shoot? I mean, what? That didn't make sense to me.
No, and he had a strip club. It was called the Carousel Club, and it was a place the cops all hung out. And he was connected through Chicago, and he claimed that he did. I don't know. His claim was he did not want Jackie to suffer. Well, wait a minute. I mean, what a thing to say. Jackie's suffering. Her husband's dead. And then he later wanted to talk, and nobody wanted to talk to him. Who knows? But she was killed she was killed. They found her the next morning in barbiturates and
Pete, how powerful was Marcelo?
Carlos. The mob was run by. There was in Miami. There was a guy named Santos Traficante, and Santos's mother was a Cuban, and his father was the mob boss. He became the mob boss. And then in Chicago, it's Sam Giancana. And remember, this is the New York guys weren't part of this at all. This was really Chicago. It was about Jimmy Hoffa. It was about what was taking place in Florida. They were, they wanted to get back to Cuba. That's and Jack Kennedy double-crossed them. They took his help. They took his help in winning that election. And then his brother kept coming after him.
And the help through the Teamsters unions, the unions then?
Well, the Teamsters were just funding the mob's operations in Las Vegas. They were that movie Casino is really excellent about how it happened. But I'm kind of a Jimmy Hoffa fan. I mean, Jimmy was who he was. But Jimmy didn't lose those guys money. He made them money, but he was still part of it. But yet all those names of all of those people, the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigated all those other deaths. There was a lot of people died around this. And what did Kurt Vonnegut say? And then so it goes. But
well, whatever you do, Pete, pull up the New York Post headlines.
Yeah, we'll
right.
look at it.
This article has just been released today, so the timing of it is perfect for you. You have a great day. I love you. Have a great
kind.
day.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, next one we'll try. There's a line open. Nick, you waited. Good afternoon. You're on the show. Thank you.
Thanks for taking my call. I believe that there is no secret department that exists somewhere in the bowels of the government that plans all this stuff. I believe what happens is unfortunately, there are enough people who have a God complex who want to get elected and get power because they have the answers to all our problems. And it happens in every generation. And I think some interesting parallels could be made between Kennedy's assassination and the assassination of Julius Caesar.
Wow, because the people that killed Caesar, we're trained to look upon them as bad people, but in fact, they were good. They did the right thing in killing Caesar. They stopped him from taking full power in the Senate and proclaiming himself a god.
But then, when it precipitated a horrible civil war, and then they turned out almost as bad as they thought Caesar was.
In fact, worse.
Worse.
But remember, Caesar is going to do what? He's going to proclaim himself a god. And the Senate was a republic. And he was going to override it. And they plotted and they killed him. And you're right. There was a civil war begins, and a terrible civil war, in fact. And it's the beginning of the end of the empire.
Right.
But
the guys like Mark Antony, I think it was, and the others involved, in their own way, they turned out as just as bad as the person they killed.
But isn't that always the case?
Yes.
I mean, history, damn it, repeats itself, but it makes, if you usurp me, don't you become worse than me to maintain the power that now that you have it. Cromwell, when Cromwell, overthrows the royalty of Great Britain, becomes far worse than the royals were on their worst day. The Bolsheviks and the Romanovs, Mao and Chiang, they become worse. It's obviously you follow the concept.
Yes, I do. And I think that I just think that unfortunately for a very small group of people who have a godlike or God complex, that's the people you have to guard against. And that's why our founding fathers tried to disperse political power as much as possible because they didn't want that to happen in this country.
That's why Thomas Jefferson had no national church, no standing army, and no national bank, because they knew what could possibly, or not possibly happen, but was happening.
Right. And we have a national bank now. It's called the Federal Reserve.
Absolutely.
But let me ask you one more question. I know there are plenty of other people waiting. Who's the guy? I'm sorry, I'm blanking out. LBJ must have known about the report that the war in Vietnam was unwinnable. Why did he prosecute it and it escalated?
He didn't. He remember they're making a deal. This is not a defense of Lyndon Johnson, but Richard Nixon gets Claire Chennault's wife to go under the cover of darkness and go to 2 and Key in Saigon, and they're going to sit down. They're going to make a deal. It's going to end the same way, but they're going to make the deal. And Richard Nixon, when he's running for office now, he starts his "I have a secret plan," which of course we now know he didn't have. So,
right.
But when he goes and she tells 2 and Key that Nixon can get them a better deal. That the deal that they're getting under the Johnson administration, a much better deal can be had under Nixon. Don't take the deal. Don't end the war. And of course, then Nixon is campaigning, I will end the war with honor. And he had a peace with honor that he talked about.
Kennedy was assassinated in November '63. LBJ gets reelected in the fall of '64, and he prosecutes the war before all the things you just said were happening, that they could get a better deal and all that stuff.
No, that Lyndon Johnson, when after the Tet Offensive, Lyndon Johnson knows, or if he finally begins to understand, and then they pull Westmoreland back, and they put Creighton Abrams in charge.
But that didn't happen until the spring of '68. What happened in '64, '65, '66, '67 when he was vigorously prosecuting the war?
He absolutely. He believed that he was not going to be the first American president to lose a war, and
he knew when the authorities were telling him,
of course he knew,
that the war was unwinnable.
Of course he knew,
and he would probably lose the election.
Yes. Did you ever read? And if you don't get a copy of it, it's entitled "Bright Shining Lie." It is probably the best of all of the books, and there are some damn good ones. But Bright Shining Lie is they knew after the Battle of the Idrang, and when Robert McNamara does the Pentagon Papers, and they know that they can't win. It's unwinnable. And they're told it's unwinnable. And Robert McNamara never reads the Pentagon Papers. And Lyndon Johnson, I don't know what Lyndon Johnson's thinking, but he thinks that he actually thinks that Ho Chi Minh thinks like he does. And when these people write about these decisions made in history, where there's Adolf Hitler and Neville Chamberlain. Adolf Hitler is thinking 180 degrees different than Neville Chamberlain, but Winston Churchill thinks like Adolf Hitler thinks. Lyndon Johnson thought that Ho Chi Minh thought like he did, that if he could give you dams and bridges and build schools and all that kind of, that he did in Texas, or he did in, as president of the United States, that people would cooperate with him and go along with him. He believed that about the civil rights movement until Rap Brown showed up, and till the Black Panthers showed up, and when those guys showed up, and he believed that he was going to get along with Dr. King, and he was going to get along with Ralph Abernathy, and he was going to get along, and they were going to be all these nice people, and they were all going to get along. Lyndon Johnson misthought these people, but he really legitimately thought that Ho thought like he did. Ho was thinking nothing like he was thinking.
Well, I find that interesting, and you probably are right, but he was a political animal. LBJ was a political animal, and I'm surprised that he was so naive to think that.
But he did. He actually believed that was going to happen for him, and of course Nixon's undermining him. But he pursued, as you said, the war as much as he wanted to, and he escalated the war, and then. But the weird thing to me has always been how quickly everything ends in Cuba. I mean, honest to God, when you look at their Cuban policies, Nick, full on attempts to get rid of Castro and overthrow their government. And almost the second that John Kennedy's dead, that all ends and Southeast Asia begins.
Interesting. I've got to run, and I'm sure you got other people who want to get on.
Take care of yourself. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
All right. Where do we stand here? We're taking calls. We're taking breaks. Take a break. All right. Should I read my live? And okay, we'll do that. Adam runs the show. Talk about our friends at Water Pros. And Water Pros cares about the quality of your water. We have these guys, and they came and they installed, and it's beauty. You can remove forever chemicals and microplastics in hard water with Water Pros. I urge you to do this because it's free. They'll come and test your water. You start the process, go to waterpros.net and sign up for your free in-home consultation. They'll come to your home, they'll test your water, they'll answer all of your questions and concerns about your water. Look, it's important. And this is a gimme. They come and they test it for free. You can be there. You can watch them run the tests. I did. Trust these guys with your water. Water Pros is family-owned and it's veteran-owned business dedicated to providing you with the best in water treatment for far less than the other guys. Go to waterpros.net today and request your free water test. The phone number is pretty easy. Call them up today. 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554. 303-862-5554. And tell them, I'd like the Peter Boyles special. Come and test my water. 303-862-5554.
At this hour, I'm Christina Aguayo in Dallas, and here are your top stories. The man who police say drove... At this hour, I'm Christina Aguayo in Dallas, and here are your top stories. Family members and school communities have identified 9 of the victims killed in the New Year's Day terror attack in New Orleans, where an ISIS-inspired suspect drove a pickup truck through a crowded street before opening fire. Drew Dauphin, a 2023 graduate of Auburn University who worked at the Honda, Alabama auto plant. 25-year-old Billy DeMaio, a recent Auburn University graduate and a New York-based account executive for the media company Audacity. Matthew Tenedorio, a beloved audiovisual technician for the Superdome and a Pearl River Central High School graduate. 21-year-old Herbert Gruthrow was confirmed to have lost his life by family members who took to social media announcing his death. He graduated from Shaw High School in 2021. 18-year-old Kareem Badawi, who was attending his freshman year at the University of Alabama. 27-year-old Tiger Besh, the native of Lafayette, Louisiana, was a former Princeton football player and had been working as a junior trader in New York City. 37-year-old Reggie Hunter, a father of an 11-year-old and a 1-year-old, known for his sense of humor. 18-year-old Nakira Dido, a nursing student from Gulfport in South Mississippi, whose mother said she snuck out of the house that night. 28-year-old Nicole Perez, a deli manager who had just moved into a new apartment in Metairie with her 4-year-old son. In Dallas, Christina Aguayo, Salem News Channel.
Afternoon, everybody, on a Saturday. 39 will be the high, 30 on Sunday and Monday, 38 degrees. I'm Peter Boyles. This is Radio Free Denver, good old 710 KNUS. Thank you for being here. I went in and talking to Adam during the break. I said, do you like this show? Because I love this show, but it's like, it is so unfettered. I mean, it's just going in a million different directions and on all kinds of different levels. There's moments when I go, okay, good thing you only do this once a week. Lines are jammed. This is Bill. Bill, you waited. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, and thank you.
Good afternoon, Pete. Thanks for having me. I talked to you about a year ago. You were having a show on JFK. I just got a minute or two to mention it, but I want to mention it again. This book, I got a mini library on JFK assassinations.
Wow.
This book, you got to read this. It's called Files on JFK. It's interviews with confessed assassin James E. Files. He was a CIA mob contract hitman.
I do know this book. Go ahead.
He was on the grassy knoll, and he fired the shot that blew Kennedy's the side of his head off. It's 500 pages. It's real extensive. The interview is from his jail cell in Joliet. And he may be dead by now. I don't know, because this book's a few years old, but can I give the website too?
Oh, of course, do please.
Okay, inquiries, it says www.jfkmurdersolved.com.
Now, if I may, does that organization or that group of organizations still exist today?
I don't know what organizations. What do you mean?
That's what I'm asking you. You said it was the mob CIA.
Yeah.
And I believe that because they both had reason and they were both rogue factions inside of the CIA and certainly organized crime in New Orleans and Miami and Chicago. So who was he working for?
Well, the CIA and the mob.
And how did he?
He says in the interview he showed up to the grassy knoll, or he showed up to the Dealey Plaza that morning. He said it was like Spook Central. He said he saw all these guys that he knew of in the agencies and in the mob just wandering around, and he went to the grassy knoll and he fired this brand new, I think it was a 223 little portable rifle he had in his briefcase. And he fired the last shot that hit Kennedy's side of his head. And Charles Nicoletti was part of his team, but was in another location.
So then what did he do? Because I've not read the book.
He eventually ended up back in Chicago, but they killed all the guys that were involved, and he was picked up and almost beaten to death and left dead on the street. And he somehow survived. He got somebody to help him. He got well out of the hospital, and then he got put in jail for getting a gunfight with some cops, and that's how he ended up in Joliet. But he confessed in jail that he was the guy. It's really a good book. I hope you can find it.
No, there has to be an explanation for why Johnny Rosselli was murdered and why Sam Giancana was murdered. Remember, they're going before the church committee. And they're murdered. And there wasn't any reason other than what they knew. And it was Tony Arcardo, perhaps or John Rosselli was murdered in Florida, probably by Santos Traficante. They had to murder these guys. Now, I don't know about the fellow you're talking about. I haven't read that book, but I've seen that story before.
Yeah, the book is compiled and edited by this Swedish guy named Wim Dankbar.
Okay.
But it's 500 pages of interviews, and it is really good. It's really complete.
But they had to. I mean, this idea you're talking about cleaning it up afterward. They did. They had to clean it up. And the two most prominent people involved were John Rosselli and and Sam Giancana. And the church committee subpoenas them. So Sam comes back from Mexico. Johns goes fishing with somebody, and they put him in a 55-gallon drum, and they cut his body up and put him in. Those two guys were prominents. I don't know. I mean, I like I said, I don't know what you do with this show, and I don't know what you do with all of the kinds of things that are being said.
This book kind of ties in to all my other books on the JFK assassination.
All right, so,
but this guy, James Files,
all right,
he
who
confessed.
Who calls
from
the
jail.
who calls the shot? Who's the one that says do it, or the ones who say do it?
Well, I guess somebody in the CIA and the mob. I don't know. I know Marcello was a big part of it.
Carlos, yeah.
And I'm sure they got together through the attempted assassinations of Castro.
Yes, they did. There was Alpha 66 and Omega 7, and what they were trying to do was they were trying to get their hotels back. They wanted gambling, prostitution. They wanted to run Cuba again, like they ran it under Batista.
I hope you can find this book.
I will. Yeah, I'll do my level best. I really will.
Yeah, it's Files on JFK,
Okay. All right.
edited by Wim Dankbar.
Yeah. I appreciate. Thank you, Bill, for coming and making a call. Thank you, Ralph. Good afternoon. Thank you. You're on the show. We got about 25 minutes left in the show. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
man.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the deep state, and I guess I should start with a quote from Hannah Arendt: "The banality of evil."
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Why did all of the German civil servants and the army and so forth support Hitler? Well, they didn't think they were doing anything very
That's
wrong.
right. They thought they were doing
And
right.
there was I think a general, 3-star Army general in Vietnam put his finger on it. He said that bureaucracy is a system necessary to get things done. So the question is, who decides what to get done? And you had a caller who mentioned Mark Antony. You mentioned Cromwell, the Bolsheviks. And the bottom line is, if you replace a system, then you will not survive unless you use the existing system to support you. That means you make small changes in your direction, more or less small, that you can get away with. And so the system that was tipped one way, then because it is a system and because evil is only banal, it tips the other way. So the question about deep state really is a question about, is bureaucracy itself evil? And if you say it is, then how do we get things done?
Or does it, like the way I've eventually come to think, do these exist like watching an amoeba divide itself, that suddenly something will pop up and will do what's required to motivate the forces of history or mark off the phases of social development or a collective consciousness that has not reached a point of historical outlook or sociological insight, but it just happens. And then it goes away until it has to happen again. And that seems that doesn't go anywhere for me. But I think it.
Well, I come from a slightly different perspective, and that is that survival is the most important thing for any organization, whether it be a system of bureaucracy or a person. Therefore, the question becomes, what does whoever is the new ruler do that will persuade the existing system that he is necessary for their survival?
Okay,
and
so
I go back, and you mentioned John Paul Vann.
Yeah.
Well, the concept is, and it's basically a lie, that you should be speaking truth to power. The
John
answer
Van.
is
That was John Van.
absolutely. And I saw John Venn twice in my life.
Did you really?
Yes. Once I was a sophomore at the Air Force Academy, and John Paul Van was on essentially a speaking tour talking about the tragedy or the failure of the South Vietnamese Army at Ap Bac in 1963. And I want to tip my hat to the lady whose father was a colonel that went there and gave a accurate and truthful report.
We got a minute. Well, I didn't know you had
The problem with Van was he was on a speaking tour to tell the truth about Ap Bac. He was forced into retirement, denied a promotion.
Yes, he was.
And what he was saying was, this is a war that we cannot win because the South Vietnam, exactly as the lady's father said.
Exactly true.
That was truth to power.
Yeah, I met Neil Sheehan. That's my connection. And he brings with him this young kid, looks straight out of hippie land, long blonde hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I thought, because Neil Sheehan was responsible for the Pentagon Papers he's gone now, but what a wonderful, wonderful, tough, brilliant man. And I said, Mr. Sheehan, I said, I'm Peter Boyles. He said, Peter, I want you to meet John Paul Van II. It was John Van's son. Yeah. No, I mean, next time you call, we'll talk about John Van.
Okay.
What a life.
Have a good day.
You too, man. All right. What a good way to end talking about John Van. And how his career ended. And he died in a helicopter, but he was an American Mandarin. He was, and no one knows much about him, and it is what it is. I don't know how to judge this show. I really don't. I think Adam and I will have a little conversation when it's over. What was this show all about? It was exactly what I think what I wanted to do. It became the show that I wanted it to become, but talk radio, no man its master. It takes a scholar to formulate clear conceptions of how to do this, and I'm certainly not that scholar. But it's that was a study of culture, I think, this morning, if nothing else. That is it. We'll see if we can come back with something else next week. But boys, that first hour of talk radio, wow, that was a blitzer. All right, Adam, take a bow, buddy. You did a job on that. And how close are we to pulling the pin? We'll take a break and then we'll come back and say goodbye. All right, stay here, everybody. Afternoon, everybody. It's a Saturday, 7:10 KNUS. It's going to be one of those afternoons you want to sleep and read. 39 the high, 14 tonight, and 30 on Sunday. Coming up on time, I think who's on line 3? It's Mike. Hey, Mike on line 3. You're on the show. Good afternoon. Thank you, sir. And you're up.
Hey, Mike. Hey, it's a pleasure to talk to you. It's weird how this happened. I thought I was calling the Mike Boyle restaurant show. And this kid goes, "This is Peter Boyles." And I go, "I'm a huge fan of Peter. Peter, I listened to you for years.
Brother, man.
I'm a huge fan, and it just reminds me that, the old days of great radio. I mean, you and Alan Berg,
Wow.
Those were some years, weren't they?
Indeed they were. Thank you.
Hey, but anyway, I'll talk to him, and I'm just trying to think, what would I say to you? And I just, the Ramseys have been in the news, John Ramsey, and all these alternate theories. So what do you now, I remember you were all over that in the day.
Just put this
and I believe you, like me, thought they were guilty.
Of course they are. Put this
Absolutely. So what do you think about all this stuff in the news lately?
I don't know. I don't know who's behind it. And it's Netflix, and it's Michael Tracy, and it's every low down 2-bit who. Remember this when people ask me about it. The one
You're probably sick of it.
One grand juror came out and spoke with Charlie Brennan and said, "Look, we wanted to indict them both for the murder of the little girl." And then a couple years after that, some paperwork got out. They wanted to indict them for the murder of the little girl. These are the people who saw everything. It wasn't like you and I.
Anybody that knows about that letter, that letter was ridiculous.
But the point is that the grand jury, Alex Hunter would not do it. They wanted to do it. The grand jury wanted to do it. And I think after that, anybody that says anything else and the grand jurors saw everything, soup to nuts. They saw everything, and they said, indict them both. So that should
I'll tell you what,
something.
I'd like to read a book that you wrote about that. I'm sure you could write a book about it.
I don't know. There's a Perfect Murder, Perfect Town is what the Charlie Brennan co-wrote. Somebody's going to do something in the near future, but it's almost like John Ramsey and those people. They shed their skin twice a year. I mean, I just kind of look at them and they're just like they're who they are. I'm going to grab one more quick call. Good to hear your voice. Thank you. We go to Tim. Tim, we're under we got about 4 minutes, I think. Tim, thank you. You're on the show.
Hey, Pete, man. If there's ever a day to sit back, put your feet up and listen to talk radio.
Brother, man, I cannot figure this show out, and it's almost over. But thank you.
No, I listened. I remember that November show you did on JFK, and I just want to say that, personally, I believe it was a conspiracy. But as Americans, what if we do find out it was a conspiracy?
Thank you.
What if we do find out that our own government betrayed us? Where do we go now? What do we do?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have they done it before, and will they do it again?
I'm a 30-year military veteran. I've worked with both line and flag officers, and I know people in the military that are such true believers that they'll go to any extreme if they think truth, justice, and the American way is not being upheld. They're gonna, if whatever that is for them, that version for them, they will make sure it's done. And I think that's really the root cause is that.
Well, but there has to be a reason. There has to be a prime mover. There has to be a motor. There has to be something that pulls you ahead. And if this deep state was not a term I had heard until all of this begins on Trump had the election stolen from him, and then we started hearing the deep state. But it's been called, the shadow government. It's been called the establishment. It's been, given all kinds of, guilds, and does it exist? And so the question I ask, this is a great way to end with you. Does it exist?
Well, I think it exists to the extent of what people are willing to do and what they believe.
An example.
The whole Trump election being stolen in 2020. People were to go to any extreme to say that election was stolen from him.
Very good. That's an excellent. There's no better way to leave than to leave on that. We close.
Yes.
So I look at stuff like this, but in the meantime, your point's well taken. I've heard so much in the last 4 years, and now Donald Trump's coming back in, and I have great hopes for what's about to happen. But let's see it happen.
Yeah, let's
see it happen. Oh man, Tim, thank you. Great way to end the show. thank you, sir. So now I don't know what we do next week. It's like I'm going to sometime probably tomorrow mid-afternoon, turn this thing on the internet and listen to it and watch it and say, okay, what have we done? But actually asking about, theories of history. It's something that happens on a postgraduate level, but the human nature theory of us is the view that history is the last analysis has been determined by human nature. Boy, not if you apply that rule to this radio show this morning, or this afternoon, rather, this morning, you'd come away with one, wouldn't you? But that was good. It was like great stuff. It was really a lot of really good abstract thinking and people that were out of the box on things that they were saying, and people that made you say, wait a minute, let me bring that back. Say that again. And that stuff makes all the sense in the world. Yep. Wow. So that was good stuff.
What I really like about this show, and I always tell you off air, is
you on the air saying this right now?
Yes,
okay, go ahead.
I learn something every week, multiple things. And this week, I'd never heard of Dorothy Kilgallen.
Dorothy Kilgallen.
I'm going to go home and read about that. It's fascinating. Yeah. Just from what I've browsed online just during the show, I need to know more about that. So thank you for
she was murdered. Well, the caller brought Dorothy Kilgallen. We might have brought it up, but people that are dead that were around Jack Kennedy's murder, and people that turned up. Well, we just mentioned Johnny Rosselli and Sam Giancana, two gangsters. And they were set to testify in the church committee, and that was it. They accepted the subpoenas, and they never. Well, I think did Sam go one? Maybe Johnny went. Maybe Johnny went and dodged it, and Sam was set to go, but he was cooking peppers in his kitchen, cooking peppers and sausage. And somebody, when they shot him around the mouth, and it's called the mark of the squealer. Truly. I mean, they used a .22 and they shot a circle of bullets around his mouth. And that was the end of Momo, Sam Giancana. All right, everybody. Thank you for the cards and letters. And in spite of them, we'll be back here next Saturday. Thank you, Adam Walker.